would like to suggest that ICASA conduct an inquiry into this phenomenon, particularly in broadcasters, and then table a report to Parliament.
We don't regulate the content of the news. We regulate that news must be done in a fair and transparent manner. So I don't know, the committee will guide and say how do they envisage this.
That's our focus today, yes. The sharp increase of the production and circulation of fake news, which is raising concern, given the purposefully deceptive nature of these stories, ranging from misinformation, fast report, sensationalism, and even satire. Very good morning to you. I'm Eben Janssen. I'm Elvis President.
That's correct, Eben, and we're asking you that question. How do you spot fake news? That's the question we pose to you. You can let us know what's on your mind on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom, as well as on Facebook.
It's very difficult. It's not easy. Even for us as professionals, you go back to the source and you have a look at it, and does it make sense? Is it a reputable source? It's very difficult in today's day and age to make that distinction. But Elvis, we're also running a poll. There was a surprising development yesterday, wasn't it?
Very surprising. Gerry Nel joined AfriForum yesterday. He left the NPA. And we're asking you the question, is this good, bad, or surprising? Well, over 50% of you, 52% are saying it is absolutely surprising that Gerry Nel would leave the NPA and go to AfriForum. 259
votes in. Thank you for voting, and thank you for tweeting us. Mr. Eric says his move, no matter the spin, is an aim by those desiring regime change to merely settle political scores against the ANC.
This one from Monwabisi says, 24 hours of notice is such a short notice. Gerry Nel have something behind. I don't know behind where, but there we go.
Yes, Eric comes back and he says Gerry Nel must be asked if the AfriForum is going to pay him far better than the NPA did. 24 hours notice is just dramatic. Yes, there have been concerns raised over financing and the like and all these sorts of things. It was a surprise, and well, South Africa shares your view that it is a big surprise, this move by Gerry Nel to join AfriForum. But we'll deal with that and some of the other stories. Of course, our focus today is fake news. But before we get into fake news, let's get the morning's top stories from Elvis President.
The Health Ombud Professor Malachapuru Makgoba is expected to release the final report into the circumstances surrounding the deaths of 39 mentally ill patients in Gauteng this morning. Eskom promises to cut power supply of electricity to 8 municipalities that failed to come up with a payment plan today. And President Jacob Zuma describes the African Union's decision to readmit Morocco as difficult but necessary. Those are all your headlines, but before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front. A very good morning to you.
Good morning. You guys sound like you have your hands full. What with all the news that's going on in the rest of the world? Gerry Nel leaving the NPA.
Well, and with fake news on top of it.
A lot of the news is fake.
Maybe it's fake that Gerry Nel joined AfriForum.
That's what, gentlemen. Good morning to you. This is what we have for you in the sports today. No fake news, I promise you.
Coming 1-0 up, you want to try and extend our lead as a team, and that's probably our main focus.
The Proteas are intent on building on their victory in the first ODI against Sri Lanka when they meet in Durban later today.
More concentrate, more intelligent, and with more goals. I want to win.
Burkina Faso will not let Egypt's famed pedigree get in their way when they meet in the first semi-final of AFCON in Gabon tonight.
Clipped in by Henderson here. Milner will attack it. It's a good ball back in. 1-1.
Liverpool break their recent 3-match streak of home losses and hold table-topping Chelsea to a 1-1 draw in a thrilling match at Anfield.
An equaliser that's the foundation for a potential Liverpool comeback.
All this I'll have in more detail at 10:40. I'll also be having a look at the transfer window with it having closed last night. Be sure to stick around for an entire bulletin today. But for now, it is back to Elvis, who's got the news.
Thank you, Kendall. Top story this morning. The final report into the circumstances surrounding the deaths of 39 psychiatric patients here in Gauteng will be released this morning. The Health Ombudsman, Professor Malakapuru Makhoba, says that the Health MEC, Kodani Mashlangu, has provided the feedback relating to the report. Makhoba will convene a meeting with complainants and respondents to inform them about his findings and the recommendations of his report. The patients died while in the care of various NGOs after the provincial government failed to renew a contract with the Life Isidimeni clinic that was looking after them. Eskom says it may have to interrupt the supply of electricity to the 8 municipalities that have failed to come up with a payment plan. The power utility was engaged in overnight talks with the affected local government authorities, which had not yielded anything concrete by late last night. This after 32 of the 40 municipalities came up with payment plans to settle the outstanding debt of over 8 billion rand owed to the utility. On the line now, joining us from Eskom, is the spokesperson, Kulu Pasiwe. Mr. Pasiwe, a very good morning to you, sir, and welcome.
Good morning to you, and to our listeners as well.
Tell us, who are these 8 municipalities that you are targeting, that's in your firing line, and from which provinces are they?
You're correct. The 8 municipalities are 3 from the Northern Cape, namely Ubuntu, Renosterbeek, and another one called Kaiharib. In the Free State, we have 2 municipalities, namely Moate and Pumelela. Another 2 municipalities in the Mpumalanga province, namely Emalahleni and Sugaligwa. And then 1 in the northwest, which is Naledi municipality.
We understand, though, that you have given the municipalities an extension. Is that correct?
That is correct. We do believe as a company that we are a rational company. We are reasonable. We are led by management which is responsive and responsible. We have given municipalities at least 7 days for them to come up with plans as to how they're going to pay. And then if they do fail, then unfortunately it means that from sometime next week, we will be interrupting their power supply.
Why is it so difficult for the 8 municipalities to make payment arrangements, and how much are they collectively owing Eskom?
Well, collectively, municipalities in the nation owe Eskom about 10.2 billion rand. We have so far collected just over 1.3 billion rand, so we still have a long way to go in terms of getting all the money they owe us. But the plan is to make sure that all this money, 10.2 billion rand, is collected before the end of our financial year, which will end in the 31st of March 2018. But the biggest challenge that municipalities are facing, some of them is that they are very small. If you take a municipality like Naledi, it has towns like Vryburg and I think another one called Zorinkow. You don't have a lot of economic activity in those areas, and sometimes they do battle in terms of getting the money from their population or residents, because many of them are unemployed and things like that. So sometimes it's about economic situations in those municipalities.
But are they currently servicing their debts and their accounts with Eskom?
Well, Naledi in particular has been failing for a while now, which is why, you remember before the request by the Minister of Public Enterprises for us to give them some kind of a grace period, which ended yesterday. They have been battling. Other municipalities in the northwest were also being interrupted in terms of their power supply, but they were able to come up with the money, and therefore they were off the hook. So this one has been battling, and we are sort of hopeful that with the intervention now of the provincial government, hopefully they'll come up with a plan so that we can avoid situations where people are interrupted. The most important thing that people should remember, which is why Eskom is also being responsive in this manner, is that some people actually depend largely on electricity, especially people who are using oxygen machines. So it is in situations like this that we really have to think for people like that, and that's why we give this grace period to these municipalities to do something so that we don't inconvenience people and unfortunately having some people losing their lives because of power interruptions.
So you've given them this reprieve not to cut them off today. You've given them 7 days. What will happen after 7 days? And what do they need to do in this period to do what is right?
Essentially 2 things. They just have to make the payments either in full or a portion thereof. and then sign an agreement with Eskom as to how they're going to pay going forward. Let's take a municipality like Emalahleni in Mpumalanga. They owe Eskom nearly 1 billion rand. It's possibly not feasible for them to pay the entire 1 billion rand in one go. What they can do, which is what some municipalities have done, is to pay half of it, and then they sign an agreement with Eskom about how they're going to pay the remaining half.
And if they don't have the half, would 10% do?
Well, 10%, to be honest with you, in a situation like this where someone owes 1 billion rand, it's not going to go a long way, I'm afraid. It means that their monthly repayments will have to be very high. So it's better to come up with half so that your monthly repayments are sort of affordable and something that you can afford. If you start with at a lower base, it means that you're going to have to pay much higher, and which also opens the risk of defaulting. So we don't want to go there, which is why we're asking them to also help us so that we can help them.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Pasiwe, thank you so much for your time and joining us here.
Thank you, sir.
That was Kulu Pasiwe, the Eskom spokesperson, joining us on the line. So, 8 municipalities off the hook for today, but they only have 7 days. You remember that song? Well, government has begun the process of officially pulling out of the International Criminal Court, the ICC. Justice and Correctional Services Minister Michael Masuta has introduced the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court Act repeal bill. Now, the Justice Committee will now call for public comments on the bill before it is processed in Parliament. The minister also announced that South Africa is expected to appear before the ICC in April to explain why it didn't arrest the Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir in 2015. The dispute led to South Africa's decision to withdraw from the court. Former top state prosecutor Gerrie Nel says he was neither unhappy at the NPA nor was he pushed to leave the authority. Nel tendered his resignation yesterday and will now head the lobby group AfriForum's private prosecutions unit, a move that has drawn some criticism. Nel says he wants to ensure everyone is equal before the law.
That cannot happen. We cannot run roughshod.
Dubbed the Bulldog for his fierce style of cross-examining witnesses.
Now we have that. We have
Gerrie Nel, a decorated advocate, took down the man who was once South Africa's top cop, Jackie Selebi, for corruption, and jailed Paralympian Oscar Pistorius for killing his girlfriend. Said to be overseen for years and facing charges himself at some point, Nel says he has no axe to grind with his former bosses.
I've not had a discussion with Mr. Abrams. We've had meetings. In all my years in the NPA, our paths never crossed.
The private prosecutions unit will pursue cases that the state refuses or fails to prosecute. But Nel would not be drawn into commenting about possible cases.
We will not do that. We will not, through the media, even indicate who we're looking at until such time that we've decided to prosecute the matter.
And he appeared unfazed about possible challenges to obtain certificates to prosecute.
I believe 100% in our courts and our court system, the integrity of our courts. If there's any delay, we'll use the normal processes in enforcing compliance with what the NPA should be doing.
And that unit will be closely watched.
Seeing Gerrie Nel joining AfriForum, I think that they will be pursuing some of the private criminal prosecution that they think that maybe Mr. Nel was unable to carry out within the NPA, and those prosecutions that the suspicion continue to linger that there is no political will to prosecute some of those cases. I can also even include the possible prosecution of Mr. Zuma.
I've known and I've read.
Nel's shock move elicited sharp criticism on social media. AfriForum has previously been accused of pro-Afrikaner interests, gunning for political elite, including EFF leader Julius Malema and even President Jacob Zuma. Nel said the unit would be taking on cases from anyone and not exclusively from AfriForum members. Griselda Lewis, SABC News in Johannesburg.
And that is why we're asking you that question on our poll today, seeing that Gerrie Nel has left the NPA to join AfriForum. We're asking you, Gerrie Nel joins AfriForum. Is it good? Is it bad? Well, we wanted to ask ugly, but we ask surprising. And this is what you have to say. 51% of you are saying it is very surprising that Gerrie Nel joined AfriForum. From the 291 votes we have, 27% is saying it's a bad idea, and only 22% says it's good. Well, that's on the poll today. You can keep on voting, and you can also send us tweets on that. We'll read them as we continue. On the continent now, President Jacob Zuma has described the African Union's decision on Morocco as difficult but necessary. The continental body has taken a decision to accept Morocco's application for readmission during the 28th Ordinary Summit of the Heads of State and Government in Ethiopia. Morocco left the organization in 1984. This was after the AU recognized the independence of Western Sahara, which Morocco regards as part of its historic territory. Morocco was the only country in Africa which was not an AU member. Meanwhile, the ANC has described the African Union's decision to readmit Morocco back into the African Union as regrettable, saying that it represents a significant setback to the Sahrawi people's struggle for independence in the Western Sahara. 39 of the 54 states approved Morocco's return. Meanwhile, the African Union has backed a plan to push for a collective withdrawal from the International Criminal Court, the ICC, which many countries on the continent believe are unfairly targeting them. Now, the decision is not legally binding, so South Africa announced its decision to withdraw from the ICC in October last year, if you can recall. It followed shortly after that dispute in 2015 over a visit by the Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir, who is wanted by the tribunal for alleged war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. Now, tomorrow, that's Friday, we'll take a look at that story intensely, so you don't want to miss it. Stay tuned to your favorite channel, Channel 404. This is the Newsroom. But this morning, we talk about fake news. Let's go over to Eben for more.
Yeah, Elvis, we're also asking the question of the day, of course. How do you spot fake news? It's very difficult, even if you're a professional, if you've been in the trade, journalism for many, many years. It's becoming more and more difficult because it's becoming very sophisticated, the way that fake news is being driven. Now, throughout 2016, there's been a sharp increase in the production and the circulation of fake news in the South African media. This has resulted in great cause for concern, given the purposely deceptive nature of the stories in the circulation of fake news stories. They range from misinformation, satire, and sensationalism to even straight-out biased reports. Now, fake news stories contain deliberately misleading information and often have prominent political agendas. Now, we spoke to Professor Herman Wasserman, who is the director of the Center for Film and Media Studies at the University of Cape Town, about this.
Worldwide phenomenon, and I think it has largely to do with the way that the media landscape, the media ecology has shifted to an online one, where it is much easier to produce and to circulate and to share information, and it's less rigorously checked. So I think that's why we see, especially online, a rise in these sort of reports that are circulated and recirculated by other members of the public or users of the online media. So predominantly, I think it's the reason for that is the shift away from mainstream news as the primary agenda setter to an online world where there's lots of information floating around, and it's very difficult to ascertain which reports are true and which are false.
Is that then maybe a suggestion, Professor, that with the advent of social media, that has become more pronounced in terms of fake news?
Well, I think social media certainly has a big role to play there, and I think that's why it is so important that everybody that has an online account, everybody that uses social media, are aware of this phenomenon, and that they remember that they are also co-producers of news, that news is now produced also by everybody that shares and posts and forwards these sort of messages. So it's very important, I think, for members of the public to remain aware and to remain critical of the reports that they receive, and also what they share and what they post on platforms like Facebook and Twitter.
Now, some have called for social media sites to verify content to tackle the issue. Do you think that that is even achievable?
It's probably very difficult to achieve. I think it's probably a good thing that social media sites have some sort of filter or some sort of checking mechanism, but I think it's very difficult to achieve. I think ultimately it will be up to users of these media, of members of the online community, to also make sure that they are media literate, that they're critical, that they think about what they read and what they post and repost, and that they corroborate what they find online with more trustworthy mainstream sources. So I think it's very important that this is something that it's not only the online sites, the responsibility of the online sites, or the responsibility of journalists, but the responsibility of everyone that accesses and uses online media to make sure that they use it critically and that they are informed about the dangers of spreading fake news, further spreading it.
The importance of social media, Professor, how important is it for our industry in the media, as well as even politics?
Well, I think we are seeing increasingly politics that is becoming very important, especially now with the election of Donald Trump in the US. I think social media has played a very big role, especially these sort of so-called filter bubbles that are created, where people only speak to like-minded people. Their biases or their views are reconfirmed, and there's very few voices that actually contradict them because they are in this sort of online social media bubble. So I think politically that is, and socially it is playing a big role in the way to shape the way people think and the way that people make social political decisions. I think in our country we have seen allegations now of the ANC so-called war room and backroom operations that have come out in court papers, and that the party denies, but there's an ongoing discourse around that. We see that the media is playing a very central role in politics and framing political debates, and there's certainly an attempt also to win the media war, if you want to call it that, and that's largely played out online these days. So social media, I think, is central to all these developments.
Is that perhaps an indicator, Professor, that fake news is driving the political agenda here in South Africa?
I would be careful to say that it drives it. I think that might be an exaggeration. I think it's becoming more important, so it's becoming part of the landscape. But I think there are a great deal of trust still in the mainstream media. Some of that trust is being eroded due to various factors, but I think I wouldn't say fake news is driving the agenda, but I think social media, to a large extent, is becoming central in setting the political agenda. So I think and fake news is a part of that broader landscape on social media and online media. That includes, I think, also other forms of spreading online news, like even apps like WhatsApp and cell phone messages. I think we will be seeing more of that in future, I think, in political campaigns.
Consumers of social media and even traditional media, how would they spot fake news?
Well, I think usually, if it sounds too sensational or too good to be true, it often is. I think it's a very good practice to corroborate what you see with other sources, to make sure that you don't only rely on one source. Usually when there's something a breaking news story that it can be corroborated somewhere else, you can go and search for reputable news platforms and sites to see whether that is something that is out there and that is general knowledge. I think one also can look at websites, for instance. Are they well known? Are they established? Or is this a sort of fly-by-night? What does the name of the site look like? Does it look like some sort of imitation of a site that's just spelled differently? For instance, you could look at the advertisements that it carries. So to get a general sense of what that site is about. So I think one should be very careful and try and corroborate as far as possible. And I think what we're also seeing online, especially in Facebook and Twitter, is that these fake news sites are called out, that members of the online communities themselves do that sort of self-correction. So you often see that when something is posted, the fake news item is posted, that you will see other members of that online community coming out and saying, well, be careful, that's not true. So I think that listening to other voices, corroborating, making sure that that this is not just something that's landed in your lap and that you must believe, but corroborate that with other sources and make sure that you consult as widely as possible. I think that's important to not only look at your own circle of friends, your own little online community, your filter bubble, but read as widely as possible, corroborate the evidence, and make sure that you get a balanced picture of what's going on.
That's all you can do, really. Of course, that interview with Professor Herman Wasserman, we recorded that one yesterday because he wasn't available today. So that was a recorded interview, just to point out to you. Of course, our question of the day deals exactly with this. How do you spot fake news? It's difficult for even professionals to spot what amounts to fake news, because we're bombarded with information on social media. Do you even have the time to go and have a look at it? So that's our question. You guys are tweeting us on the question. Let's have a look at the tweets that are coming in. Monwa Bizimbonda, he says, Newsroom, I only believe news when they appear on 404. Otherwise, I don't believe others. Thank you, Monwa BC. Appreciate that. We are in the business of real news. That's what the national broadcaster in South Africa does. We only do real news. We don't do any fake news. Lucky Malachi, he says, Newsroom, very easy. Just press 405. Also programmed analysts who are good in distributing propaganda. He's talking about the hashtag fake news. Yes, everyone has a sense of humor, and that's a good thing. Lucy Massey goes further, and she says, Newsroom, CNN is just one outlet for fake news. Yep. There's an argument for that. Actually, they call it alternative facts these days. They have been caught out with blatant lies time and time again. But that's how the world seems to be working. The world seems to be working like that. Political agendas and the like. Now, Rolf Mateche is here with us. We'll talk to him about this and, of course, around the developments around the war room, rather, not the newsroom, that's the show. The war room is something different. But before we get to Rolf, let's just have a look at what you guys are talking about, following social media. Of course, everyone's talking about this hashtag Gerinal, resignation from the MPA to join AfriForum. You guys have tweeted us that you are very surprised. Zwelenzima Vavi, well, he says, pity. Gerinal has been lost to South Africa as he moves to serve an organization of an exclusive club of a particular race, stroke Afrikaner, he says. That's the view of Zwelenzima Vavi. And yeah, maybe that's how South Africans see this. Yesterday was the funeral service, of course, of the much adored Lundi Chamaga. Many South Africans paid their tributes to the great gospel singer. Also, public hearings on government's proposed hashtag sugar tax has begun. Perhaps they have our best interests at heart. Doesn't this picture put it into perspective? Yes, there's lots of sugar in almost everything that we consume. You have to be so careful these days. Of course, in other news, and of course, our focus today, fake news. That's the hashtag. It's raised alarm bells globally now. The Times posted this quote, which speaks to the core of the matter. We need to make the ability to distinguish between fact and fiction a central part of education, they say. Interesting. Then the Diceman comes and he says, what the media fails to understand, they are spreading fake news and a dishonest narrative to the world, creating dangerous instability. This after the Trump administration has refused to put officials on air at CNN due to Trump's comment about them circulating fake news. Even in Indonesia, the country is preparing now to issue fines. Yes, fines if you spread fake news. How will that change the dynamic? Very interesting. A little bit later we'll speak to the South African National Editors Forum. They're still on their way. Hopefully they make it, and we'll talk about fines. Of course, the man who's hogging the news wires is Donald Trump. The UN Secretary General has expressed his disagreement with the executive order in the US. San Francisco is suing the president over his immigration ban, and protests once again erupted last night outside the court, where Trump has nominated federal judge Neil Gorsuch as well to lead the Supreme Court. And we have to love Kenya's innocent top trend this morning. Happy New Month. Yes, January has dragged on. Some people say it feels like January had months in itself. Just a quick correction. You saw there a funeral. It was not Lundi Chiamaka's funeral. It was his memorial service. Just a point of correction there. Now, the picture of the day. This one comes from Connie Matlejwan. The real Konza is captioned, "All this noise because a man made a decision about his life. I didn't know Gerinal needed our permission to live his life, hey?" She says. Now, our comment of the day comes from Owen J. Visser, and of course, at Dr. Owen, who says, "Sugar tax will not educate on the health effects of sugar. It will only upset people for paying more. Education is the key," he says. Of course, we've dealt with sugar tax, and we'll look at it again. But time now for us to take a look at what's happening in our courts today in South Africa. We'll start in Johannesburg, the High Court, where suspended crime intelligence boss Richard Mdluli will continue giving testimony in the case relating to the 1999 murder of Oupa Ramogibe. Mdluli and fellow police officer Mtembe Ntunzi are currently on trial and facing charges of intimidation, kidnapping and assault, amongst others. Ramogibe was killed after he allegedly received death threats for dating Mdluli's former girlfriend. Then, in the Free State, one of the 5 suspects in the alleged rape of a 10-year-old boy in Tabong and Valcom at the weekend, they're expected to appear in the Magistrates Court today. Down in Cape Town, the heads of argument is set to continue in the High Court relating to the matter involving evicted residents of Bromwell Street in Woodstock. Property developers of the Woodstock Hub were granted the eviction order late last year after they bought several housing units from previous private owners for the purposes of commercial development. Justice Leslie Wynecove is yet to make a ruling on this eviction order. Still in Cape Town, 2 suspects are expected to appear in the Wynberg Magistrates Court following their arrest for being in possession of pieces of rhino horn and ivory. The Chinese nationals allegedly left behind a backpack at a restaurant in Hart Bay at the weekend, which contained horn and ivory worth over 60,000 rand. Now that's an interesting story, and we'll keep you updated as to how that develops today. First though, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll deal with fake news, and we want you to tell us, how do you spot it? Can you spot it? How do you overcome fake news after the break?
Now, this morning we focus on fake news, but it could also be called propaganda. Media personality Shaka Zulu has admitted working briefly with public relations expert Sihle Bolani. The businesswoman has made claims in the Johannesburg High Court that she was part of a covert ANC election campaign known as the War Room, aimed at discrediting the Democratic Alliance and the economic freedom fighters. That's ahead of the 2016 municipal elections. The ANC, on its part, has rejected these claims that it set up any such local covert election campaign or covert black ops. Bolani, however, has claimed in a court affidavit that an ANC campaign team known as the War Room was set up to produce a seemingly independent website, use so-called influencers on social media, and printed fake opposition parties posters of the EFF. The DA says it will ask the Independent Electoral Commission to look at these allegations that the ANC set up that covert election campaign to disempower the opposition parties ahead of last year's municipal vote. Joining us now in studio is political analyst as well as head of political economy at Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflections, Mr. Ralph Mateja. A very good morning to you, sir, and welcome.
Good morning. Thanks for inviting me.
First and foremostly, Mr. Mateja, talk to us about your reaction to the claims by the PR agent Bolani in terms of this war room or the covert black ops operation that was set up by the ANC or its volunteers, as they called.
Well, the first thing was that the ANC paid their service providers, we wouldn't have heard about this. That was my first reaction to start with.
So pay back the money first.
Exactly.
Yes.
But, you know, looking at the substance of this, what has happened, we call these people PR expert. I mean, Elvis, really, we are stretching it. These are not PR experts. The advisory was wrong in the first place. This is extremely amateur work, and this is what you get when you employ people who have got no basis on the subject matter that is being dealt with, which is politics. There tend to be this idea in South Africa that actually you can tell someone who has been watching the news every day to come and start to help you about the challenges that a political party has. That you are not going to get an in-depth understanding of what you're going through. So this is exactly what has happened. But even worse about this, Elvis, is the question of misinformation. Then it's when you cross the line where you start planting stories about other stories that are quite in the first place false, you know, in fantastic stories that are out there, and not understanding as well that South Africans, the broader majority of South Africans, don't take Twitter seriously. People should get that. If Twitter was taken seriously, the EFF would have won elections, 2016 local government election, maybe even the 2040. So the sentiments you get on those social media platforms do not always translate into what happens on the ground. And people need to understand that. So that was quite a shoddy work, very amateur work by people, I think, who actually realized that the ANC leadership is at a crisis point, and they took advantage of the ANC, and the ANC was actually vulnerable. It allowed for this kind of a thing to proliferate.
Eben?
Ralph, I'm interested to get your view because this kind of thing is not new. Underground campaigns and war rooms and the like. Every political party worth their salt should have some sort of operation to deal with, let's call it, below the line scenarios. Am I right?
You're right. Communication is very important in modern day. People have got access to digital media. It means that if you do not communicate, people are going to get, there will be a vacuum, and therefore there will be maybe wrong perception about what you do. So the principle here, there's nothing wrong with the principle. Everyone has a war room one way or another. I don't know, they might have different names, of course, what they call those kind of formation. This goes back to Nazi Germany. It's an old thing. It's an old propaganda thing. What I think is different about what we are seeing in these days, it's just the proliferation of digital media, where you are seeing this thing being put into digital media, where I think it is losing the depth of its classic maybe origins.
I thought that the war room that we heard from here in Johannesburg was initially set up to deal with service delivery shortcomings and service delivery protests. That's in the context that I understand it. So I was surprised when I heard the developments in the High Court. Did you hear similar murmurs?
You know, I would have thought the ANC would get people to help them, maybe to explain those service delivery problems and some of the protests, to deal with the substantive issues and to put a word out there. Either you can accept, manage the extent to which you accept, they do it, politicians, of course, but to have this thing become a pure PR machine that has got no relationship whatsoever with the substance of what is happening on the ground. That is exactly what baffles me. But this has not been concluded. But my sense here, I think you have runaway consultants in this issue here.
Yeah.
We've been given a mandate originally, have realized that the client is vulnerable, can take just about anything, and then they decided to come up with these ideas of 50 million and so forth. These are people who wanted to make quick cash out of the NC's vulnerability, and had the NC not got itself to that corner, it wouldn't have to deal with this now.
Now, Mr. Matega, politics, some say it's a dirty game. Isn't that perhaps, doesn't this type of operation, doesn't it come with the territory of politics?
It does come with that, but we should ask ethical questions so that people do not cross the line. I mean, to expect politicians to say nice things about each other, it's hopeless. It's not going to happen. But that doesn't mean they should be given a carte blanche to plant negative stories about each other. As a society, we still have a right to demand some level of righteousness in the manner in which these kind of war room and initiatives operate. That is where you draw the line. And I think the court might deal with that issue as to where does the legality come in. If they expedite this thing further, the legality issue can be dealt with the court. But I think that a lot of people should just hold back. Not everything in that was illegal. Actually, there just might be a small part of this thing that was illegal.
But let's look at that, because seemingly there was an independent news website, the new South African website, that was registered by Majota Kambule, better known as Fat Joe, and the so-called influencers on social media, as well as the printing of fake EFF posters and planting callers on radio stations, we believe. These were all part of the smear campaign to discredit the opposition. But did these clandestine operations really work in the favor of the ANC, because they lost a number of metros?
Well, there is something we don't know. It could have been worse. You can't measure that. I mean, I've heard people saying that it didn't work. Of course, initially, of course, you could say it didn't work. The NC has performed badly in the metros. What if it has helped with 10 basis points in their electoral performance? We will never know if this thing has worked or has not worked. The fact that the NC has lost those metros does not mean it didn't work. The NC lost those metros, yet the opposition could not win those metros outright. Maybe you could say, had it not been for this kind of initiative, maybe the opposition would have won those metros outright. So you can never know with certainty if this has actually worked. But the work itself, God, it was a bad job.
What action could be taken against the party found guilty of overstepping the line?
We shouldn't legalize, or we shouldn't litigate on everything. I know people are saying they want to sue and so forth. For me, the embarrassing revelations that the ANC has surrounded itself with this amateur PR, it's enough for people to know. You are talking about this thing now as you are speaking. Voters are not stupid. They are seeing these things. I don't think there is a need for people to go and sue the ANC for lying. I mean, the voters are the one who know this information, and they will process it as they vote, as they go forward. And after all, Elvis, I'm not aware of a legal principle that compels people to say great things about each other. There isn't any.
Social media, digital news, just very briefly, will that have an impact on future politics?
Oh, sure, it's going to have impact. It's going to ruin careers. It's going to bring about careers, and it's going to ruin political parties as well.
Mr. Matega, I thank you so much for your time and joining us here in studio. That was Mr. Ralph Matega. He's a political analyst as well as head of the political economy at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflections. I wanted to ask him about the political economy of those parties, but we'll do it at another time. Right now, let's take a look at what you have to say. Over to Eben.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ralph. Always nice to have you with us here in studio. Nice to see you again. Of course, we've been asking you the question around fake news. Let's have a look at what you guys are tweeting us now. Lots going on in this space. This one from Unati Grootboom. Unati comes, he says, Newsroom, don't follow and read fake news. Very simple. Unati 007 now. That's what Unati says. Don't follow and read fake news. Tabatso Mamorobela says, Newsroom, the source of the news and the publisher thereof, when it says SABC in the story and the HTTP is SABC News. Monwa Bisimbondo comes, he says, I only believe news when they appear on 404. Otherwise, I don't believe others. Monwa Bisi, we are in the business of real news at the SABC, and we've been for 80 years. That's what we do. Those are some of the views, some of your views coming in, of course. We live in a world where, well, fake information is proliferated. Quickly, let's take a look at, well, the newspapers, or some of the front pages from around the world, just to have a look. We'll start in the United States. The Financial Times reports that Donald Trump unveiled his Supreme Court nominee, Justice Neil Gorsuch, in a primetime White House ceremony that reflected the president's roots as a star of reality television and promised to shape American law for a generation. Then we move to China, where the South China Morning Post says scientists on Monday said a tiny marine creature from China that wriggled in the seabed mud around 540 million years ago may be the earliest known animal in the lengthy evolutionary path that eventually led to us human beings. Finally, we go to Israel, where the Jerusalem Post reports that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu phoned Jerusalem Mayor Nir Barkat yesterday and asked him to put an end to the municipality strike there, which of course concluded last night. This followed an attempt by Jerusalem Affairs Minister Ze'ev Elkin to resolve the situation and even bid to get President Reuven Rivlin to interfere, both before hostile sides calmed down. Yeah, we're dealing with fake news. Fake news, the rise of fake news. If I can stay in the shot, the rise of fake news. Now, we've got Sanef with us. Let's get into it, Elvis.
Yes, thank you, Eben. Now, there was a time that one could search for news online or log on to social media applications such as Twitter, Facebook, and even opening your newspaper, trusting that the news or the headline that appeared there were factual, accurate, and credible, even if they carried some bias. However, that is increasingly no longer the case with the advent of fake news, which presents fiction as fact. Against a global background of fake news, alternative facts, and misinformation, the South African online and social media space seems to be endorsing what has become a worldwide trend. Here's an example. Talk Radio 702 Sunday Times, Huffington Post, South Africa editor-at-large Ferial Haffajee were targeted in a bizarre Twitter campaign against the Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan last week. We've seen it in the newspapers. Those tweets were made to look as if they come from the established media houses and journalists. Joining us now in studio, Sam Mokukeli is the Media Freedom Subcommittee Chairperson at the South African National Editors Forum. Sanef, a very good morning to you, sir, and welcome.
Thank you, Elvis.
What is your take on the overall increase and the sense of increase of fake news in the country?
It's a terrible development. We noticed last year that the mushrooming of a number of websites, they're similar to the names of the established news outlets, and they were carrying stories that were patently false, and some of them were hateful. For example, one of the reports said that Desmond Tutu, the Archbishop, had died. I mean, that story is definitely undesirable. So we've seen this, and we condemn this trend because it causes a whole lot of confusion in society. It subverts democracy, and it raises questions of credibility, and when people start questioning the veracity of information out there.
A credibility, especially for the media industry in South Africa, I mean, that is core, isn't it? So will this not drive perhaps alternative fact?
Yeah, I mean, there is a trend, and it's quite a catchy term now when you see in the United States, people are talking about alternative fact. And the post-truth stage we've reached as a global village altogether. But I don't think this changes much in terms of the credibility of news outlets out there. News outlets have not changed. If they didn't have credibility, they still don't have. If they had credibility, they still have. So what's really happened is there's a new extension, really, in what's available out there. There's a lot of false news outlets. I mean, that's caused a confusion. So if you remain a consumer of the outlets that you had been consuming, nothing changes for you. But then there's a confusion if you move in between different platforms and outlets.
Is this emergence of fake news a new thing, or was it there all along? Some people would call it just plain propaganda.
No, there's a difference between propaganda and a parody and fake news. Fake news has always been there, but now within the .com era, and lots of apps are being out there, different websites and social media outlets. Now we're seeing a whole lot of it now coming through social media. There is actually an increase in terms of the availability of such.
Eben?
Mr. Mokukeli, if I can ask you the role of media houses in perpetuating this idea of fake news a little bit. Some of the headlines you see sometimes are borderline. They play in the grey area. I don't know if it's an industry standard to try and push circulation by sometimes dodgy headlines. One can call it that, and it stems from there. How much guilt do the media houses have in this matter?
I think we'd need to separate the two if we have to have that conversation. Fake news is totally different to us being able to critique newspapers and say their headlines are crazy, they're controversial, they're tabloids and they're different. That's something that's always been there. Newspapers will try different means to catch consumers. I mean, it's their duty. But then consumers have their right to vote with their money if they find that the news is not as credible. Fake news is totally different to that.
Doesn't that kind of set the tone or embolden those creators of fake news? Oh, they operate in the grey. We can stretch it. No,
I don't think people who drive propaganda. I mean, the incident mentioned by Elvis earlier, Huffington Post and Feral Hafaji, that's a totally different context. The context of that, you have to locate it within the debate about a so-called state capture. Feral Hafaji is one of the leading journalists in South Africa who's been writing quite boldly about state capture. So it's only natural that she gets drawn into this web and where people are creating things that are hateful to her, but it's part of that narrative or counter-narrative against state capture. And it's totally different to what newspapers would do generally to push the envelope a little bit.
Now, Sam, that leads me to my next question, because we're asking our viewers, how do you spot fake news? Or how do you spot a fake website or fake Twitter account or that sort of thing? How do you do that? And is there a way to sort of look at that and say, how do I deal with it?
It is easy, it's also not.
Yes.
Sometimes the websites, for example, if somebody runs a parody account of Times Live, for example, they would just tweak one letter in Times Live, for example, or this add Times Live 1, or somebody will create an account that says Mzansi Live. If you're not familiar with Times Live, you might just believe that it's a real deal when it isn't. So just got to be careful when you are punching in the name of that website. Just make sure that you're using the one you used to. And also, as you go through the content, sometimes there'll be spelling errors and grammar errors. Sometimes they're easy to spot. Sometimes they look legit. I mean, I've been fooled by one of them myself. But you just need to spend a bit more time and say, hey, is this real? Am I really watching a credible news site? Is this running off the main website? Can I go through my desktop to see if this is the newspaper, or is this off the app, the established app of the newspaper? So the best thing really would advise consumers is stick with the trusted brands. If your brand is 404, stick to 404. If it's a BD Live, by all means go back to BD Live. If it's running off your Facebook timeline, you have to actually have a bit of doubt.
Now, earlier we mentioned a number of fake sites that came out a couple of weeks ago, especially this one with Feral Hafaji. Now, reports of a public relations company that was based in London was responsible for this. So what sort of sanction are there for those type of people found guilty of this type of act?
Look, it's a very tricky thing. I think Rafa mentioned in the earlier slaughter, but that there's no law that says people can't say nasty things about one another. So it's a grey area. But it's been encouraging to hear that the Hawks are keen to investigate the people behind this. Perhaps they're thinking there could be a case of criminal injury against people who do these things. But I mean, most of these things, if it's generally a defamation, it would be a civil case, so you'd have to take somebody to the court and prove that you've been defamed by their action. So it is quite a grey area, and then the criminal law aspect of it. But in terms of general parody, it's not really illegal. People are allowed to say nasty things about one another. And there are a couple of our presidents in South Africa. You may remember in the early 2000s, the South African breweries took Lafutov, which was a parody company, really, to court over a T-shirt that SAB didn't like because it said it changed a few words of the SABC advertising to say black labor, white guilt. Yes. And the SABC lost throughout the courts, and it went to the Constitutional Court, where Justice Moseneke, in the main judgment, said, hey, let's laugh at each other. And then Albie Sachs, in a concurring judgment, said, okay, it's fine to laugh at one another.
Yeah. Evan?
Just in conclusion, you know, the role of journalists in our industry, there's been fears, of course, with the rise of the citizen journalist and social media sites, that our job is under threat, that, you know, we're going to be shedding jobs because this thing's gone mainstream. Everyone's a journalist now. Does it now mean that our job is becoming more important because we're the pros that have to distinguish and make sure that the facts are checked and right?
Of course, I mean, this is a downside of this new era where everybody who has access to a smartphone can be a journalist. They can be their own publishers and editors, and they can just tweet and everybody follows and think it's legit. But now it just shows you that you need credible institutions to keep doing what they do and go through all those checks that the media, mainstream media has developed to tighten things up. But it just means that the consumer as well as to catch on to the new era where they have to be extremely careful with the things they read and just make sure that they're reading it from credible institutions.
Mr. Mokokeli, as a society, should we be concerned about this increase in fake news and that actually are being used to discredit some personalities and even some organizations?
Of course. I mean, it causes confusion in society. I mean, the real effect is that it subverts democracy. News media exists in that space to help establish democracy and make sure that there's access to information and there's democratic accountability. When it's so confusing, then the other things, I mean, can't be achieved.
In 15 seconds from Sanef, your message to consumers of news out there.
Go through carefully what you read. If it's running off your Facebook timeline and it's not running anywhere else, it means it's possibly not true.
Short and sweet. Thank you, Mr. Mokokeli. That was Sam Mokokeli. He's the Media Freedom Subcommittee Chairperson at the South African National Editors Forum Summit. Right, you are talking about this. We are asking you that question. How do you spot it? Let's go over to Eben. Is there some comments? Yeah.
We don't have any. Well, we don't have any new comments. But let's take the poll quickly because Gerry Nel joined AfriForum yesterday, and we've got a lot of people voting on this poll because there's such a high level of interest in it. So we've been asking you: joins AfriForum? Is it a good thing, a bad thing, or did it surprise you? Is it a surprising thing? 310 people have voted. The majority say, well, they're surprised. And that's the mood in South Africa. South Africa was surprised by Gerry Nel joining AfriForum. 23% saying it's good. Keep voting. We'll put this up and we'll have a look a little bit later. But we're going to leave you for a short little while now, back at the top of the hour, 10 o'clock, to give you all the latest news updates. And, of course, we'll continue the discussion. So don't go away.
The world has become digital, and we need to find new ways to solve current problems.
You're capturing your geo coordinate. So if you stay in a shack, you still have an address because we know where you are.
Some are using it to tell new African narratives.
Our first priority is catering to our fans. We have to go where they are, and they're online.
That's Network with Ms. Phumelele Zondi every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time.
Doomed U.S. drone strike in the south of the country has killed 3 al-Qaeda suspects.
Death toll in Yemen's 18-month-old civil war now stands at about 10,000.
People get killed or die and are actually buried before they're recorded, and we don't have a way of recording that, but we know the numbers are much higher.
Water restrictions are to be imposed on villages in and around the Nkomazi municipality.
Pumps can't pump the water because there's no water in a river, and if the water is coming back, then it's full of mud.
Those who can pray and those who can do any miracle to make sure that we've got enough rain, give it a try.
We make sure to be where news is happening, both locally and globally.
For the latest business news, stay with us.
From South Africa to the world, we've got all your latest sporting news.
Don't miss our weather updates at every hour.
Stay tuned to News Today, Monday to Friday, from 3 to 5:30 p.m. here on SABC News.
Very good morning. If you've just joined us here on Newsroom, it is, well, 10 o'clock Central African time. Kendall Mathemati is here. Good morning, Kendall.
A very good morning to you as well as to our viewers.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, our focus this morning has been on the sharp increase of the production and circulation of fake news, which has raised concern, given the purposefully deceptive nature of the stories, ranging from misinformation, biased reporting, sensationalism, even in the space of satire. So we put this question up to you. How do you spot fake news, and how does it affect you, Kendall? We've got some tweets coming in, but how do you spot fake news?
You know, fake news is, like you said, it's very important that we make sure that you verify and whether everybody else is saying it and who is saying it.
Absolutely.
Unati Kurotbam comes out with people take advantage of social media because of its big influence in our lives. I don't read too much on social media.
Hashtag fake news. Interesting. Yes, he comes back. He says, don't follow and read fake news. It's as simple as that. Yeah, thank you very much, Unati. This one from Tebatso.
Tebatso reckons the source of the news and the publisher thereof. When it says SABC in the story, and the HTTP is www.sabc news.
Yes, go to reputable sources and double check the facts before you cause yourself a sensation or before you share it on social media. As we do, it's so easy just to click on share and push it forward. But quite often, in a court of law, you can be held accountable for forwarding fake information. We're also running a poll, of course. Advocate Gerinal, he resigned from the National Prosecuting Authority yesterday and surprised when he joined AfriForum. This is where the mood stands right now, Kendall.
310 votes. Of the 310 votes, 51% saying they are surprised that Gerinal has moved from the NPA to AfriForum, whereas 23% say it's a good thing and the rest say it's a bad. Now, Siafana comes up with the tweet that it's good news to hear that my AfriForum, they're going to pay him a better salary.
We don't know that. He says it's not about the money. Eric Mkunjulwa says, Newsroom, his move, no matter the spin, is an aim by those desiring regime change to merely settle political scores against the ANC.
Munawabisi weighs in with SABC Newsroom. 24 hours of notice is such short notice. Gerinal has something behind.
Yeah, those are your tweets. Keep it coming. This is Newsroom. This is what we're about. We love the live interaction. We love the fact that you give us your opinions, because in the world of social media, everyone's opinion really matters, Kendall. But before we look any further at that, let's take a look at the top stories right now. The Health Ombud, Professor Malekapuru Makgoba, is expected to release the final report into the circumstances surrounding the deaths of 39 mentally ill patients in Gauteng this morning. Eskom extends today's deadline to cut power supply of electricity to 8 municipalities that until now have failed to come up with a payment plan. President Jacob Zuma describes the African Union's decision to readmit Morocco as difficult but necessary. Well, those are the top stories right now. Let's go over to Kendall now to give us a quick look at what's happening in the world of sport.
100%. The transfer window closed in the world of soccer last night, but we also have some really beautiful stuff happening in the world of cricket. Good morning to you. This is what we've got for you in sports today.
Coming 1-0 up, you want to try and extend our lead as a team, and that's probably our main focus.
The Proteas are intent on building on their victory in the first ODI against Sri Lanka when they meet in Durban later today.
More than concentrate.
Burkina Faso will not let Egypt's famed pedigree get in their way when they meet in the first semi-final of AFCON in Gabon tonight.
Henderson here, Milner will attack it, it's a good ball back in, 1-1!
Liverpool break their recent 3-match streak of home losses and hold tabletop in Chelsea to a 1-0 draw in a thrilling match at Anfield.
An equaliser that's the foundation for a potential Liverpool comeback.
All this and more I've got for you later on the Sports Bulletin about 10:40. Be sure to stick around for it. For now, it is back to Eben, who's got the news.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kendall. Very good morning to you. If you are just joining us on Channel 404, this, of course, is Newsroom. Now, the final report into the circumstances surrounding the deaths of 39 psychiatric patients will be released in Gauteng shortly. The Health Ombudsman, Professor Malecha Puru Makoba, says Health MEC Kedani Matlangu has provided the feedback relating to the report. Makoba will convene a meeting with complainants and respondents to inform them about his findings and the recommendations of his report. The patients died while in the care of various NGOs after the provincial government failed to renew a contract with the Life Esedimeni clinic that was looking after them. February is Sexual Reproductive Health Awareness Month. Over this period, the Department of Health highlights the importance of, amongst others, family planning, preventing sexually transmitted infections and safe pregnancies. Minister of Health, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, spoke to SABC News about this.
This sexual reproductive health this month is to raise awareness and show the importance of contraception, the importance of planning your pregnancy, and when you are pregnant, a timely and good quality antenatal care to make sure that you have got a safe pregnancy, you deliver a very safe baby, and you deliver safely. But also the importance of preventing HIV/AIDS infection and sexually transmitted diseases. In the final analysis, we want healthy moms, we want healthy families, we want healthy babies, we want healthy societies.
Eskom has agreed to give an extension to the threatened municipalities. Eskom spokesperson Kulu Pasiwe confirmed this during an earlier interview with us here at Newsroom.
Company that we are a rational company, we are reasonable, we are led by management which is responsive and responsible. We have given municipalities at least 7 days for them to come up with plans as to how they're going to pay. And then if they do fail, then unfortunately it means that from sometime next week, we will be interrupting their power supply.
Why is it so difficult for the 8 municipalities to make payment arrangements, and how much are they collectively owing Eskom?
Well, collectively, municipalities in the nation owe Eskom about 10.2 billion rand. We have so far collected just over 1.3 billion rand, so we still have a long way to go in terms of getting all the money they owe us. But the plan is to make sure that all this money, 10.2 billion rand, is collected before the end of our financial year, which will end in the 31st of March 2018. But the biggest challenge that municipalities are facing, some of them at least, is that they are very small. If you take a municipality like Naledi, it has towns like Freiberg and I think another one called Zorinko. You don't have a lot of economic activity in those areas, and sometimes they do battle in terms of getting the money from their population or residents, because many of them are unemployed and things like that. So sometimes it's about economic situation in those municipalities.
The South African government has begun the process of officially withdrawing from the International Criminal Court. Justice and Correctional Services Minister Michael Masuta has introduced the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court Act repeal bill. The Justice Committee will now call for public comments on the bill before it is processed in Parliament. The minister also announced that South Africa is expected to appear before the ICC in April to explain why it didn't arrest Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir in 2015. The dispute led to South Africa's decision to withdraw from the court. Former top state prosecutor Gerry Nel says he was neither unhappy at the NPA nor was he pushed to leave the authority. Nel tendered his resignation yesterday and will now head lobby group AfriForum's private prosecutions unit, a move that has drawn some criticism. Nel says he wants to ensure everyone is equal before the law.
That cannot happen, Melanie. We cannot run roughshod.
Dubbed the Bulldog for his fierce style of cross-examining witnesses.
Now we have that. We have
Gerry Nel, a decorated advocate, took down the man who was once South Africa's top cop, Jackie Selebi, for corruption, and jailed Paralympian Oscar Pistorius for killing his girlfriend. Said to be overseen for years and facing charges himself at some point, Nel says he has no axe to grind with his former bosses.
I've not had a discussion with Mr. Abrams. We've had meetings. In all my years in the NPA, our paths never crossed.
The private prosecutions unit will pursue cases that the state refuses or fails to prosecute. But Nel would not be drawn into commenting about possible cases.
We will not do that. We will not, through the media, even indicate who we're looking at until such time that we've decided to prosecute the matter.
And he appeared unfazed about possible challenges to obtain certificates to prosecute.
I believe 100% in our courts and our court system, the integrity of our courts. If there's any delay, we'll use the normal processes in enforcing compliance with what the NPA should be doing.
And that unit will be closely watched.
Seeing Gerry Nel joining AfriForum, I think that they will be pursuing some of the private criminal prosecution that they think that maybe Mr. Nel was unable to carry out within the NPA, and those prosecutions that the suspicion continue to linger, that there is no political will to prosecute some of those cases. I can also even include the possible prosecution of Mr. Zuma.
I've known and I've read.
Nel's shock move elicited sharp criticism on social media. AfriForum has previously been accused of pro-Afrikaner interests, gunning for political elite, including EFF leader Julius Malema and even President Jacob Zuma. Nel said the unit would be taking on cases from anyone and not exclusively from AfriForum members. Griselda Lewis, SABC News in Johannesburg.
Now back to our top story. The Health Ombud, Professor Malekapuru Makgoba, is currently releasing the final report into the circumstances surrounding the deaths of mentally ill patients in Gauteng in Pretoria. Let's now cross there live.
Fish Mahlalela, and to my left here is Professor Mazwai, who is the chairperson of the board of the Office of Health Standard Compliance. We also have the Premier of Gauteng, Mr. David Makura. I'm sure you're going to hear from him later on. He's not going to be participating much, in this session. To my right, you have got the man of the moment, who we are all coming to listen to. We don't know what he has got in store for us. The Health Ombud, Professor Malekapuru Makgoba. Let me also welcome the families, the bereaved families, the aggrieved families here, who I believe are amongst our midst with their organizations. We hope that today here, after the Ombuds will have given us a report, we will be in a position to find our way out. Ladies and gentlemen, then lastly, let me welcome members of the media. Ladies and gentlemen, in 2010, the National Department of Health contracted 5 organizations led by the Health System Trust to conduct an audit of health standards in all our health facilities. This included, among others, the core standards of cleanliness,
safety of staff and patients, infection control, waiting times, attitude of staff to patients, and drug stockouts. It was after this audit that the decision was taken to establish a permanent structure that will inspect our facilities to ensure that they remain within acceptable standard. Hence, the Office of Health Standard Compliance was born. This is the office that called us to come here today with the CEO as Mr. Msibi and Professor Mazwai as the chairperson of the board. The Office of Health Standard Compliance was established in terms of Section 77 of the National Health Act, Act number 61 of 2003, as amended by the National Health Amendment Act, Act number 12 of 2013. As a juristic person, is also listed as a Schedule 3 Part A public entity in terms of the Public Finance Management Act, Act number 1 of 1999. When patients and members of the public felt that they have not been treated well or were treated with negligence by a health professional, they will usually lodge a complaint with statutory professional bodies like the Health Professions Council of South Africa, HPCSA, the South African Nursing Council, SANC, the South African Pharmacy Council, SABC, and the Allied Health Professions Council of South Africa. However, when patients are wronged by an institution or the system as a whole, it is difficult for them to know who to go for relief. In the past, they will usually approach the media. We then realized that there is a gap in the accountability mechanism within the health sector. A decision was taken to have a health ombudsman within the Office of Health Standard Compliance. The Act states that the minister must, after consultation with the board, appoint a suitable qualified person and experienced South African citizen as the ombudsman. That is how South Africa's first ever health ombudsman came into being, ladies and gentlemen. Section 81A of the Act defines the functions of the health ombudsman as follows. Number 1, the ombudsman may, on receipt of a written or verbal complaint relating to the norms and standards, or in his or her own initiative, consider, investigate, and dispose of the complaint in a fair, economical, and expeditious manner. 2, after each investigation, the ombudsman must submit a report together with his or her recommendations on appropriate action to the Chief Executive Officer of the Office of Health Standard Compliance. 3, where the Chief Executive Officer fails to act in accordance with the findings and recommendations of the ombudsman may request the intervention of the minister. 4, the ombudsman must, within 1 month after the end of the financial year, prepare a report on the affairs and functions of the ombudsman during the financial year in question and submit such a report to the minister for tabling in Parliament. On the 13th of September 2016, the MEC for Health in Gauteng, Ms. Katane Mahlangu, announced in the Gauteng legislature that 36 mentally ill patients referred from Life is Dimeni Psychiatric Hospital have died. As Minister of Health, I immediately requested the Health Ombudsman, Professor Malagapuru Makgoba, to investigate the circumstances surrounding the death of mentally ill patients in the Gauteng province. That report is now ready and has been handed to the CEO of the Office of Health Standard Compliance. According to the Act, presently Mr. Msibi is the acting CEO of the office. I am now handing over to him to conduct the proceedings. Mr. Msibi.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. I would like to confirm that we have received the report from the Health Ombudsman, Professor Makgoba, on the 30th. It was officially handed over to me as the acting CEO of the office. And I have considered the report, and I am in agreement with the report. I mean, concurring with the report. But Professor Makgoba has been doing the investigation On behalf of the office, I would request Professor Makgoba to present the report himself to you. I will now hand over to Professor Makgoba to present.
Oh, okay. Honorable Minister, Deputy Ministers, the Premier of Gauteng, the DG of the National Department of Health, the expert panel that did the investigation here, the family members that are here and took troubles to be with us, and their representative organizations, members of the media that have been harassing us for a little while, and maybe today they will stop after this. Ladies and gentlemen and distinguished guests, it is indeed my honor and privilege to be able to present my first report, and I'm doing this under the auspices of the OHSC. By the act that appointed me, I'm supposed to prepare a report and hand it over to the CEO of the OHSC, and for him to action the report. It is part of that action that he has requested me today to be able just to share with all of you my experiences and some of the things that I found during the investigation. So this is no longer my report. I'm just the spokesperson on behalf of the OHSC as it has already been articulated. Let me start first of all by a very simple quotation from William Osler, a famous English physician, who said, "Listen to your patient. He or she is telling you the diagnosis." During this investigation, I have listened to over 73 witnesses. Listened. And I want to believe that they have told me the diagnosis of what the problem is, and that's what I'll be presenting. The second quotation from William Osler said, "There are only two sorts of doctors, those who practice with their brains and those who practice with their tongues." Now, you know that those who practice with their tongues are called spin doctors, and some of you fall into that category, and those that practice with brains are often called physicians, and that's what some of us are. I want to preface this because I think you will read this, during what I'm going to say from now on. I was appointed, I think, by the minister in a letter dated the 26th of September with the mandate to investigate the circumstances surrounding the death of mentally ill patients in Gauteng province and advise on the way forward. That was the mandate that I was given. And of course, to investigate the death of 36 patients is quite a task and quite complex. And remember that I'm not a psychiatrist, so I last did psychiatry in 1975, but I was tasked this as the health ombudsman to be able to do that. The first thing I did in this process was to appoint an expert panel of psychiatrists and a public health expert. They are all here. There were 7 psychiatrists and there was 1 public health expert. I think they are sitting here amongst you. To go through the clinical records of the patients, the 36 patients that the MEC provided us, analyze those in the best practice of their own specialities, and come up with a report. So all they did was to look at the clinical records of the 36 patients that were provided to us and analyze the details of that with the knowledge and the expertise that they have and provide us with a report. Their full report will be available on the website because it's a complete report on its own of their analysis of what took place in this matter. I then had a second set of analysis from the inspectors here in the Office of Health Standards to go around the 27 NGOs that the MEC had given us to examine them and look at their compliance in relation to caring for the patients that were transferred to them from Life Esidimeni, and also to produce a report. These two groups did not speak to each other. They were completely independent, and they were working on separate terms of reference. And then I had decided that I would like to meet people, witnesses, under almost cross-examination, spending 1 hour with each of the witnesses, listening but also cross-examining them. As I say, I've had about 73 of those. Some of them, the interrogations took about 2 hours, others 1 hour. So I must have spent close to 80 hours just listening to people and interrogate them. And then after that, I collated the information from the expert panel, from the inspectors, from my interrogations to bring the report that I am bringing here. Now, before I go there, when this issue occurred in the media, the minister immediately dispatched his ministerial advisory committee because of the circumstances of the nature to go around quickly to the NGOs and to try and see what interventions could be done urgently, I think, to prevent further losses of life. This Ministerial Advisory Committee is chaired by Professor Solomon Rataimane. I've seen him here. He's amongst us. They went around and they closed one of the NGOs, Precious Angels, where at the time, 18 out of 47 patients had already died in that NGO. So it was immediately closed, and they recommended for us to watch other NGOs, of which I can speak about later on. But the exercise was to intervene, have a stopgap whilst we were doing the investigation. And only later on did they provide us with their report of what they found. So when we were doing our investigations, we did not have the report of the Ministerial Advisory Committee. But what they managed to achieve was obviously to stop further losses of life that we replicated throughout the system whenever we encountered NGOs that requires to be closed immediately, and we made the recommendations. So with this background, I now want to go on to the key findings. Some of you might have read some of these things in our popular media that depends on gossips, but now I'm going to give you my final report. Here are the key findings. A total of 94 and not 36 mentally ill patients have died during this process. 94, not 60, not 80, not 87, whatever you read in the Sowetan was wrong. It's 94, and this, I call it a provisional number. The reason why I call it a provisional number is because there are other agencies that are investigating this process, like the South African Police. They are still investigating. There are corpses that are still in mortuaries that have not been identified, and we don't know whether they form part of this. Not all the information we could get from the NGO was often full. Some of them were actually reluctant to give information. And some families are now just coming out of the woodworks, sending us names of their relatives that they want us to investigate. So I suspect
presumed U.S. drone strike in the south of the country has killed 3 al-Qaeda suspects.
Death toll in Yemen's 18-month-old civil war now stands at about 10,000.
People get killed or die and are actually buried before they're recorded, and we don't have a way of recording that, but we know the numbers are much higher.
Water restrictions are to be imposed on villages in and around the Nkomazi municipality.
Pumps can't pump the water because there's no water in a river, and if the water is coming back, then it's full of mud.
Those who can pray and those who can do any miracle to make sure that we've got enough rain, give it a try.
If you ask this pretentious mixologist what is needed to make the ultimate cocktail, she'd say a thorough knowledge of science. Ooh, right in the face. Yes. If you asked us, we'd say it's less about science and more about, well, chemistry. Tops at Spa. Good spirits, good advice, no rocket science.
Well, we have to apologise for losing the link there, unfortunately. That's the final report into the circumstances surrounding the deaths of, as you heard, not 36 or 39 mentally ill patients here in Gauteng, but the number was confirmed to be 94. We'll try and get back there as soon as that link is back up. But in the meantime, we'll carry on with matters that are just as important for the world. Now, in yet another alarming move that has the world's environmentalists and scientists up in arms, US President Donald Trump is preparing to withdraw from the climate change agreement, or the Paris Accord. This global deal is backed by around 200 countries and is said to be one of former President Barack Obama's passions and legacy. Now, in the past, Trump is known to have called global warming a hoax. But to give us some insight, we are joined in studio by the Program Director at Greenpeace Africa, Lyndon Moma. Very good morning to you, Lyndon. Thanks for being with us here on Newsroom.
Thank you.
Now, let's start with Donald Trump, because, you know, he's gone on record as calling climate change a hoax. That is both reckless and a little bit ill-considered, isn't it?
It is, definitely. It is reckless, and he has been on record in the campaign trail saying that climate change is not caused by man or humans. So yes, it is a hoax.
Let's start with a climate change agreement that more than 200 countries are involved with. Just talk to us quickly what this deal would actually mean for a country. Is it a set of rules and regulations that everyone has to adhere to?
Yes, exactly. Many countries around the world have committed to the Paris Agreement, and this basically means that they've committed to reducing the temperatures at 1.5 and keeping it at 1.5. It's quite important that we actually take plans, all countries take plans to reduce their greenhouse emissions to keep the temperatures at 1.5. We've already seen the devastating effects of climate change, especially in African countries. And yes, we have to commit to these rules, and all countries have to produce national plans to make sure that they keep temperatures at 1.5 degrees.
We see unprecedented drought and unprecedented flooding, not just on the African continent, but around the world. Within this sort of context, surely it must anger you at Greenpeace that someone like Donald Trump, who's a key influencer, can say the things that he says. Yes,
Donald Trump is the president of the USA. He's the president of the free world. And the US is one of the major emitters of greenhouse gas emissions, therefore causing global warming. The US has to chart the path in actually taking down, limiting greenhouse gas emissions. And Donald Trump's recent actions clearly state that he is not going to go along with this.
Do you think that the example that he's setting can almost cause other, let's call it sinners, big emitters, can cause them to follow suit?
We at Greenpeace plan to resist any actions to take out the Paris Accord. We plan to resist this. We're already doing that. We will work with our allies. We will work with indigenous communities. We will work with communities affected by climate change in Africa to make sure that we actually resist any move by Donald Trump to pull out of the Paris Agreement, and other countries who are planning to do that. But I don't think that other countries will follow this move, because climate change is here with us. It is real. It is happening, and we will resist Donald Trump's moves.
Can you just maybe contextualize a little bit? Why is it so significant to have the US on board with this climate change agreement? And is it impossible to go ahead with this agreement without the US?
Indeed, it is possible to go ahead with the agreement, but it is important to have the US, like I said, because they're one of the major emitters. The US has to chart the path for green energy. We need to move away from fossil fuel and bring on green energy along the world. And the US needs to lead that path. What Donald Trump is doing right now is appointing people to as Secretary of State who are actually oil gurus and they're oil giants, and they're going to take us to, they're not going to take us away from the fossil fuel age. So we need to resist that. And the US needs to work with other countries around the world to show that renewable energy is possible and it is the path for the future.
Now, we also see that he's just said that, oh, we need to go back to coal, which is almost taking us back to the 1800s.
It is.
A little bit. Tell us, what would it mean for the US and then for the world if they take these steps and then pull out of this agreement?
Well, it is disastrous, I must say, if the US does pull out of the Paris agreement. It is disastrous. But as I said before, we will resist it. For the rest of the world, it sends a clear message that they are not taking climate change seriously, and that they are also, of course, rolling back all the efforts made by the former president to push the Paris agreements. We will try as much as possible to make sure that the world moves ahead with the agreements committed in Paris, and we will resist Donald Trump.
The process of withdrawing from the climate agreement, the Paris Accord as it's called, what would that process be and how long would it take?
Well, it's a 4-year commitment, and Donald Trump can use any executive powers to withdraw. And also the national plans to reduce greenhouse gas emissions are, of course, voluntarily. Like I said, with all indigenous communities, we will make sure that the Paris Accords, the agreements that were made in the Paris Accords, they are actually enforced. And if Donald Trump, as he's trying to do now, does try to push us towards fossil fuel and promote oil industries, we will try and resist that.
Now, Donald Trump is also, of course, planning to block the Clean Power Plan in the US. It's a measure to reduce carbon emissions in the power sector specifically. What is that all about, and what would that mean?
Well, the Clean Power Accord basically is trying to push clean energy. And we have worked with communities who have already, indigenous communities who were actually blocking pipelines which will push fossil fuel. And what we will do is make sure that the Clean Power Accord stays. We'll work with our allies and indigenous communities to make sure that this stays. Basically, Donald Trump is trying to come back and take away any measures that Obama pushed forward to push clean energy. And like I said, this is really disastrous for the world, because we need to end the age of fossil fuel.
Yeah, it's as simple as that. We see the campaigns that you guys are running as Greenpeace. They're quite aggressive, some of them. The one that stands out, of course, was the banner "Resist" that you were hanging up opposite the White House. I think it was a couple of days after the swearing-in ceremony. Tell us about the Resist campaign, and what do you want civil society to do to get involved with the Resist campaign?
We want civil society and indigenous communities across the world, and even in Africa, to join us in the Resist campaign, to resist any measures or policies or even executive orders that the Trump administration would take to roll back the Paris Accord. But we also want civil society to join us in resisting racial injustice, to resisting environmental injustice, to resisting social injustice, because all the moves that Trump has made since he came into power is basically rolling back all the measures. I mean, he's taken out all the laws, all the policies around climate change. He's stopped his administration from tweeting on climate change. And we're asking all civil society to join us and resist any move by Donald Trump.
Now, you talk about these executive orders on various deals. What is the environmental world? What does it feel his next move might be with regards to conservation and climate change, if there is a next move?
Well, we've already seen his move so far that he's appointing oil executives as Secretary of State, as the head of the Environmental Protection Agency in the US. And this is wrong. We know that Donald Trump is going to continue on this path because he has not been listening to civil society so far. I mean, you can see the massive protests around all the orders he's taken since he came into power. We expect that he might withdraw the US from the Paris Accord. We hope that he doesn't, and he actually listens to civil society and he listens to the voice of everybody across the world. But yes, we will continue to resist.
Well, I thank you for joining us today. The Program Director, Greenpeace Africa, Lindlin Moama, talking about, of course, the US pulling out of the Paris Accord. This is the climate change agreement signed by more than 200 countries from around the world. Can we afford to do this? Or can we afford not to resist is the question that we all need to ask ourselves. What is the kind of world that we want to leave for tomorrow? Of course. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll give you a sports update, of course. The report into the circumstances surrounding the deaths of now 94 psychiatric patients that is in Gauteng has been released, and the number, of course, is 94. We're waiting for that link to get back up. If it does, we will. Otherwise, we'll give you an update at the top of the hour. But sports after a short break.
This is SABC News Prime Time, live from Johannesburg. Police have made a massive drugs bust in Khayelitsha on the Cape Flats. They seized Mandrax tablets worth 26 million rand. The 529,000 Mandrax tablets seized were hidden in an underground storage facility. A scavenging insect, which has destroyed tomato fields abroad, has been spotted locally. Several organizations are working together to fend off this potential catastrophe. In 2008, it jumped the Mediterranean from Spain and caused havoc in 15 African countries.
My name is Kendall Makamat, and of course I've got your sports report on Newsroom. Got lots to get through, starting with the Proteas, who are not going to let the Sri Lankans off the hook when they meet in Durban later today. Having won the first ODI by 8 wickets with 94 balls to spare, they promised to not let their foot off the gas. Hashim Amla spoke to the media.
Playing in Kingsmead is always nice. We've had some good success as a one-day team. Managed to get a few runs here and there. We always want to perform. Whether it's here at Kingsmead or any other venue in the country. So I don't feel any added pressure. I just feel like we want to, coming 1-0 up, you want to try and extend our lead as a team, and that's probably our main focus. I think the preparation has been very good. I mean, if you look at the build-up we've had as a team, winning the last series as convincingly as we did, being 1-0 up here, it's boding very well. Certainly the coaches and the captains have tried to put the structures in place for us to succeed, and it's really pleasing that everything's been working really well. Nobody's ever done the illusion that everything's hunky-dory and you're just going to keep going up and up and up. There will be some challenges in between this phase from here and the Champions Trophy, and if that comes, you've got to be patient in it and you've got to go through it. But at the moment, we're playing very good cricket. Team seems very well settled. And we just want to take it from there.
Those are fighting words from Hashim Amla. They may sound soft, but they're definitely fighting words. Now, 2013 Africa Cup of Nations finalists Burkina Faso are in with a chance to go all the way in this year's tournament in Gabon. The Burkinabe beat Tunisia in the quarterfinals on Saturday to book a place in the semi-finals, where they'll face off against 7-time champions Egypt this evening.
Excellent ball, they have it cleared, back post, outside.
On their way to the semis, the Egyptians had to grind out a win against fellow North Africans
Morocco in the quarterfinals on Sunday night. They survived a scare when Morocco hit the crossbar early in the second half. The quarterfinal match was just 3 minutes from going to extra time when the Pharaohs found the back of the net. This means that Burkina Faso should be wary of the 7-time AFCON champions who know how to win crucial matches.
Lo primero que tiene que tener un entrenador es confianza en el equipo que tiene.
Firstly, every coach should have confidence in their team. Without a doubt, one doesn't know where one will get to. We hope to get to the final and win it. We need to always have hope, perspective, and above all, we need to believe.
Y sobre todo hay que tener mucha ilusión si uno cree que tiene y está convencido, como en el caso mío.
We have a great group of players, not necessarily technically, but in their humanity, their love for their country, their humility. I know they'll do their utmost to win.
Que quieren a su país, que van a hacer todo lo posible, que son humildes.
The West Africans, however, are no pushovers either. Earlier in this year's tournament, they managed to play to a draw against African powerhouse Cameroon, and they held hosts Gabon to a 1-1 draw before beating Guinea-Bissau and Tunisia 2-0. Burkina Faso are still in search of their first AFCON championship trophy.
I said before, the Egypt team is a very strong team, very talented players, very experienced players. Is the country do have more and more titles, so it's not easy tomorrow for Burkina Faso. I know, but I know too the game is not easy to Egypt, so. I want tomorrow my plays more quickly, more concentrate, more intelligent, and with more goals. I want to win. I want to win.
4 years ago, Burkina Faso lost 1-0 in the final to the Stephen Keshi-led Nigeria at the FNB Stadium. They would love to go one better this time around and lift the trophy that has been eluding them since AFCON's inception 60 years ago. The Burkina Faso-Egypt match will kick off at 9 p.m. and will be live on SABC 1 and on some SABC radio stations. Mduduzi Ndlovu, SABC News.
Now, a little earlier, just before I came on air, we were in Pretoria where the Health Ombudsman Malgapuru Makgoba, Professor Malgapuru Makgoba, was releasing a report into deaths of psychiatric patients in various NGOs. The link that we'd lost is now back up. So we go right there live to see what's happening in Pretoria.
Expert panels through the inspectors of the Office of Health Standards and through the interviews that I've held have revealed that there has been excess and unnecessary but preventable death for some of the diseases that have occurred. I don't believe that everybody could have lived during that time, but equally there is strong evidence that some of these deaths could have been prevented. That's why they did not occur in every place. Maybe just to cite, Reverend Mabue is here also. I've seen him, I've interviewed him. He went to see his son called Billy at a place called Bopilong Sirman. When he arrived there, his son told him, "Daddy, I'm hungry." And Reverend Mabue went to buy some Nando's or KFC, I'm not sure which one he likes. And he says when he came there, his son ate the food so ravenously that he even wanted to eat the plastic. That's how hungry the child was. And he was wasted. So that's the dynamic of what happened in this incident, and I want to thank you again on behalf, I'm doing this on behalf of the OHSC. I will now hand over to Bafana. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. I have already indicated that the report was handed over to the Office of Health and Compliance on the 30th, and we are concurring with the report. We will now I will hand over to our communication person who will take questions. But after we've taken the questions, Professor Mazwai will hand over the report officially to the final report to the Premier of Gauteng and to the Minister of Health in the Republic. And we will then vacate from the OHSC. We are requesting the media to remain behind because the Premier would like to also brief the media after we've finished here. And we would also like to see families first when we are done here. But I'll now hand over to the...
Yeah, sorry, CEO, I just thought I need to mention something before the media personnel conducts the question session, because it's very important. According to Section 88A of the Act, subsection 1, it provides that any person aggrieved by any decision of the office or any findings and recommendations of the Umbad in relation to the matter regulated by this Act, or a person acting on his or her behalf, may, within 30 days of him or her gaining knowledge of that decision, lodge a written appeal with the minister. I think it's important for people to know that these are provided for in the Act, so that when certain actions are taken, they must not be surprised. Subsection 2 of that same Act, that means subsection 2 of Section 88A, states that the minister must, upon receipt of the application's written appeal, as contemplated in subsection 1, number A, appoint an independent ad hoc tribunal in terms of subsection 3. Number B, submit the appeal to the tribunal for adjudication in the prescribed manner. And it goes on to say the tribunal contemplated in subsection 2 may do two things. A, it may confirm, set aside, or vary the decision of the office of the Umbad. And 2, it must notify the parties in the decision. Subsection 3 states a tribunal contemplated in section 2 must consist of not more than 3 persons, of whom, number A, 1 must be a person who is a retired judge of a high court or a retired magistrate who must chair the tribunal. And B, 2 must be persons appointed on account of their knowledge of the healthcare industry. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm mentioning this because it's not commonly known in the Act. That it means the recommendations of the professor, anybody who might feel that they don't like them will appeal to me, and I'm not the one who's going to take the final decision. It's a judge, a retired judge with 2 experts in health, and I will have to accept their recommendation. That will include, in my understanding, recommendation number 10, which says appropriate legal proceedings should be instituted or administrative action taken against the NGOs that were found to have been operationally unlawful and where the mental health patients died. So the legal actions mentioned here is not only for the staff of Gauteng, it's even for the NGOs themselves, because we believe they acted illegally. And all of them can appeal in terms of this section 88A. And that appeal must happen within 30 days of their knowing, within the 30 days of their coming to knowledge about the recommendations against them. I'm also mentioning it, ladies and gentlemen, because during question time, I might be required to answer questions. Now, the main person who will answer questions will be the professor. Some questions might be policy, might be related to the policy or to the overall health sector. And the professor may not be able to answer them, like this issue of data. Yes, I've got an answer to that about what we're doing. But where I'm going to find it difficult, and I don't want the media to say I'm dodging, the recommendations that has been made here, because of this section 88 where people are going to appeal to me, it might be difficult for me to answer questions. Because when people appeal, they'll say, oh, but the minister has already made his feelings known. So the questions that I might find difficult to answer is, number 1, the recommendation that the Premier of Gauteng must look at the suitability of the MEC to continue in that position. That's given to the Premier. Number 2, that the HOD of Gauteng, Dr. Bani Seleban, must be suspended immediately and be taken to DC and be reported to the Health Professions Council of South Africa, and the police investigation hand over to the NPA. These are 4 things. I may not be able to comment. Dr. Manamela, the director of mental health, the recommendations here that she must be suspended with immediate effect, that she must be taken to DC. She's a nurse by profession. She must be reported to the South African Nursing Council, and the investigation by police must be sent to the relevant authorities like the NPA. I may not be. The last group are the Deputy Directors General, who are also, as the report read, out of fear did what they were not supposed to have done. All those are, including the NGOs, all of whom were found to be acting, working without licenses, who must be taken up legally. I am not going to be able to comment when you ask me, because they are within these 30 days of appeal. Only after the 30 days has expired, whether they've appealed or not, is then that the minister will be able to say something. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you very much, everyone. Our panel have spoken. I'll now open the session and provide everyone with an opportunity to ask questions. Like I said before, just say your name and also the organization that you are representing. The floor is now officially open. I'll take 3 set of questions. I've noted 1, 2, 3, 4. Is that 4? 4 and 5. In that sequence, please. You are first, ma'am. You are first, yes.
Hi, my name is Kyla Hermanson. I'm from ENCA's Checkpoints. Firstly, I'd just like to thank the professor for your very thorough work on this report. I just noticed in the recommendations that you do say that all the NGOs that remain should be placed under review and should be inspected, and you'll proceed from there. But I just wanted to know, what implications does that have for the remaining patients who are still living in those NGOs?
I'll take the second one. In that sequence. You are the second one, yes.
Hi, my name is Namat Ndebele from Spotlight. My question's for the Minister. Minister, do you anticipate an appeal from the MEC?
The third one? You are the third? Yes, yes.
Good day, I'm Suzanne Venter from Rapport. My question is also about the MEC. We started with stories in March last year after desperate parents contacted us. They sent us emails to me, hundreds of emails that was sent to the MEC. Then I made an appointment with her. I went to her office. I was sitting at the table with her, and I showed her the emails, and she said to me that she's attending to all of them. So now I just want to make it clear, in case she knew. I showed them to her, and she never attended to any problem. She never attended to any of the patients' family members' emails that was sent to her. She repeatedly told me, well, send it to me, and then I did, and she ignored it. She also said regarding the NGOs, because I repeatedly gathered that she's trying to shift the blame to the NGOs. And I confronted her with that, and she repeatedly said to me that the NGOs were all inspected and they were fine. So now I want to know why, now the NGOs are in the wrong. It's just, it's very weird. And the other thing that I want to know is who approved this whole thing, because according to information that I got, this whole plan is based on an overseas model where you move patients back into the community. But given that there are clinics where these patients can get proper medication, proper care, and proper rehabilitation and stimulation. So the decision was made to take this plan through, but the second part of the plan was never given any attention to. And when I asked the MEC, but what about the second plan, she just ignored me. So, yeah, that's just very weird. I mean, what's going to happen going forward? Are you going to give attention to that model?
Thank you. I'll take the fourth one. Let's try to be, short, straight to the point when we ask questions for the sake of time.
My name is Lara Lopez Gonzalez, and I'm with Becky Sisa at the Mail and Guardian. Cullinan also had a lot of problems, and Cullinan is not an NGO, but is a Department of Health facility. Are patients still at Cullinan, and what is being done to remedy the problems at that facility?
Minister, it's Masego Rahlaga from Eyewitness News. My question is pretty simple, and I know that you're not her direct boss, but as the health minister, are you in any way embarrassed by these findings and what's been happening with the move from Esitimeni for these patients? I mean, this is a lot, and the health ombudsman says it's 94 and still counting.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll hand over to our panel just to
Thank you. I think the first question deals with the patients that are in the NGOs. In my recommendations, I made it very clear, and I've heard this loud and clear during my interviews, that there are many patients that are still at risk in the NGOs. So I've requested that they are removed from those NGOs and they are placed in hospital environments where they can be looked after. So I've not simply said it must be de-established. The project must be established, but we must take care of the risk that still exists in some of the NGOs, even though they might not have had death in there, because we don't know when that is gonna happen. Now, the issue that Suzanne Fenter raises about the NGOs, their criteria, and that they have been inspected. The inspectors in the OHSC and many other people, including people in the National Department of Health, have asked for the criteria that was used by the Gauteng Directorate of Mental Health. We have never found that criteria. So we didn't have it, and I think that is also captured in the report. So the criteria either was opaque, it wasn't clear, and what is important is that even though they went around licensing places, sometimes they went to the NGOs and said, you know, I think you can open an NGO. Open and then we'll give you a license. So even before an inspection was done, a license was given. And sometimes they would go and say, oh, you've got 20 patients. No, make it 60, we will provide you with a license. And then the people would be attracted by the money, and then they would open for more people, and then the place would be overcrowded. So there are many of these kind of activities. Now, here is the strong evidence. When I asked the director, Dr. Manamela, who signed the license? She said she signed the license. Did you know that you were not supposed to sign the license? She knew that she was not supposed to sign the license because it's supposed to be signed by the head of the department. When I asked the head of the department, did you know that she's not supposed to sign the license? The answer was yes, I knew that, but we had never had time to correct it. So the inspectors, one of our inspectors went around to one of the NGOs. When they arrived there, they found an old, nice lady, and they asked this lady, can you show us your license? Because that's the first thing they wanted. This old lady says, no, I've got the old license. I'll show it to you, but I won't give it to you because the new license is now coming. And what happened was that after the evidence, they'd given the evidence, the HOD then went around and took all the licenses that were signed by Dr. Manamela and re-signed them as the new licenses without any inspection. That's why I want to put that on the table. In terms of CCRC, there has been problems of staffing there at the CCRC. There has been problems of governance there at CCRC. There has been problems of budgeting at CCRC, but it has also been complexified by the fact that they have had 3 different NGOs residing at CCRC that were not licensed. One was called Life Disabled, the next one was called Siabadinga, the third one was called Anchor, and it was poor with no resources, but hosting patients there from CCRC. So they have now got a new CEO who's trying to correct all these deficiencies that have taken place. So there is a process taking place at the CCRC. But yeah, those are the issues.
I think there are 2 questions for me. Whether I anticipate any appeal from the MEC. Let me just say I've read the relevant sections of the Act, Section 88A, that any person who feel aggrieved by these findings must appeal within 30 days to the minister. And the minister must choose that tribunal led by a judge. That's all I can say. I don't want to anticipate who's going to appeal and who is not. It will be very wrong and dangerous to do so. The last question is whether I'm embarrassed as the minister. I'm not embarrassed. I'm distressed and very angry, actually. It's quite distressing. So it goes beyond embarrassment. It brings anger in you and the distress, because as the professor said, something like this should have been avoided. That's why, in this regard, I welcome recommendation number 14, which the prof did not read, but you are going to find it. It has always been a debate, this issue, when we were dealing with NHI, National Health Insurance. How do you deal with this issue of concurrence, where a province has got certain powers, the minister has certain powers? When you asked me about this embarrassment, you said, yes, you acknowledge that I'm not her immediate boss. Her boss is the Premier of Gauteng, but I'm the Minister of Health, all these health acts. Now that concurrency is being debated because it's causing problems in the national health system. Now, the professor, and remember, these functions of mental health were residing in the national department. They were only transferred to provinces after the Mental Health Act of 2002. Is then that the power lied in provinces. Because the Life ECD license was there for 40 years. After democracy, it was under the national department. But after the Mental Health Act of 2002, it was then referred to provinces. So I fully welcome recommendation number 14, which says there's an urgent need to review the National Health Act 2003 and the Mental Health Act 2002 to harmonize and bring alignment to different spheres of government. Centralization of certain functions and powers of the Mental Health Act must revert back to the national minister, while Schedule 4, Part A of the Constitution, and Section 3, Subsection 2, Subsection 21, Subsection 1, Subsection 25, Subsection 1 and 2, Subsection 48 and 49, and Section 90 of the National Health Act, number 61 of 2003, recognizes and defines health as a concurrent competence between the national and provincial government sphere. The findings and lessons of this investigation merits a review of all these things, acts and the concurrency. Furthermore, projects of high impact on the quality and reputation of the national health system and whose outcomes undermine human dignity, human well-being, and human life must not be permitted nor be undertaken without the express permission of the National Health Minister or his or her nominee. This is the finding that answers where in future the minister will come in, and this is something that we are going to look at very carefully. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I please also open up the floor again once more? I'll take another 5 set of questions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In that sequence. Yeah, I've noted you. I'll start with the number 1. You're first, yes. Yeah. Can you give us the mic?
Good morning. My name's Hajra Amaji from Power FM. Professor, are you comfortable that these NGOs are still operating and that there's over 1,200 patients in them? Or would you go as far as to suggest that these patients, even those that are not high risk, should perhaps be transferred back to Life Esidimeni? Secondly, you said that many of the people you interviewed within the Gauteng Department of Health were gripped by fear. Would you go as far as to recommend criminal action against Dr. Manamela, the HOD, or the MEC? And then, have you made any findings or recommendations, or do you have an opinion on compensation for the families of victims, or should this happen on an individual basis or through a court of law? And then, Minister, because surely the national ministry does have some level of culpability, because it comes from the legislation in 2003 and 2004 that these patients should be transferred to NGOs. And I understand the implementation was terrible, but surely there is some level of accountability in terms of the legislation back then and what the provinces tried to do. And finally, as the Health Ombudsman recommended, the suitability of the MEC should be considered. Surely you as Minister have to have an opinion on this recommendation in particular. I'm not talking about Mahlangu, I'm talking about the principle that an ombudsman can say the suitability of an MEC, or the principle that an ombudsman could say the suitability or the fitness of a minister, or in fact the president, should be questioned. Because if this is accepted, then tomorrow another ombudsman could say President Jacob Zuma is not fit for office, and this will set a precedent.
Number 2.
My name is Pat Sidley and I'm from the British Medical Journal. Part of my question was asked, and that had to do with the criminal ramifications. But what I would like to know is what possibilities there are for criminal cases, which laws in particular would incur criminal prosecutions.
Good morning. Thank you, Professor Makgoba. My name is Mark Hayward. I'm from Section 27. So it's directed to Professor Makgoba. Professor Makgoba, you described the decision to close Life Esidimeni as precipitate. I think you used that word. And you also, in describing the behavior of Manamela, described what really is fraudulent behavior. My question is whether you recommend a broader criminal investigation into whether there were corrupt motives behind the closure of Life Esidimeni and the establishing of these NGOs for this purposes. And linked to that, whether your report says anything about the fact that twice the Gauteng Health Department was taken to court, or once to court, to try to stop the closure on behalf of the South African Depression and Anxiety Group. And the Gauteng Health Department went before court and told the court that they were satisfied with the conditions at Takalani in particular, where a number of people died. Do you consider that perjury, and do you consider perjury to be a criminal offense when it is conducted before the courts?
Sanbona.
Ya, mina into engifuna ngiyezwa iminister yakhuluma kodwa mina ngifuna ukwazi ukuthi kulaba abashonelwe imindeni yabo ithatha siphi isinqumo emndenini ikhalisa ngani ngoba imindeni eminye ibingasebenzi mayingcwaba laba bantu ukubhlungu kithi enhlizweni zethu ngabafowethu nabodadewethu abasiphelele ibhedlela ukube idimeni kudala ishintsha abantu mina ngicela ukwazi ukuthi kwenteka kanjani ukuthi lokho kwenteke ngoba iminister yehealth ikhona umthetho ukhona ukuthi kuze kufe abantu abangaka abanye bangakatholakala kwentiwa yini lokho kuba kuthini disebenzi ngiyabonga.
Sorry, before you move on, can you also mention your name and the organization that you are representing? Oh, it's a family man. Okay.
Igama lami ngubonga noKasithola.
Okay, no thanks. Oh, a family man. Okay, no, I'll take it.
Offenses Timo, SABC TV News. Minister, I'd like to know if maybe this could have been a corrupt money-making scheme, since some of the centers were actually registered before the patients were actually brought in, before the inspections were actually conducted. Thanks.
That's fine. I'll open up for another session, but now let's first begin this question.
I think, is it Omarji? I think she asked too many questions in the same thing, and I don't have a long span of attention, so I forgot most of what she asked. Okay, I want to deal with the issue of criminal actions and compensation. First of all, I actually sat down and asked myself, if this investigation had been done by a priest, what would be his recommendation or her recommendation? I'm sure she would have found that many people have sinned and maybe we should pray for them. If this investigation had been done by a lawyer, maybe the word criminal would have come into the lexicon of the person. This was done by a medical scientist who understands the practice of medicine. And that's how I have used the language here. And the reason why I avoided words like criminal and so forth is because my recommendations were about processes going forward that are not going to be determined by me, but are going to be determined by other structures that are relevant to the people that I am charging here. I'm not going to be doing anything, but I should recommend a process of that facilitate that. You will notice that I've never mentioned the word NPA here because I will bring Sean Abrams very quickly into this room. Now, I didn't do that, but I have used the general context of saying that the relevant law agencies must be informed so that they can take appropriate action. Now, there are many of these kind of agencies without prescribing which ones must happen. So, Mark, I understand what you're saying, but I have not used that, and I'm sure other people may come to the same conclusions as you. The issue of compensation, and I want to do this in the following way. If you look at the act that appointed me, it says I must dispose of complaints fairly, without fear and prejudice, but also in the most economic way. I think you must read that very carefully. It means I must do things on the cheap generally. I shouldn't be asking for money. Now, my looking into this matter, when I was speaking to the relatives and to the families, there are obviously different expectations by different families. Some, obviously, they want closure to know what happened to their related ones. Others want to be compensated for funerals and others. Others obviously want to take what I would call formal legal actions and so forth. Now, in my recommendations, which I didn't make, which is recommendation number 17, I have said, in the light of the fact that the relatives and the families have lost confidence in the credibility of the MEC, the Premier of the province and the national minister must convene a meeting with the families to listen to them and hear what their suggestions should be. Secondly, to appoint perhaps an experienced South African who is experienced in what I call alternative dispute resolution, so that I think you can flush out, I think, the issue of how you move forward in terms of compensation. I've not said there shouldn't be compensation, but it may not be everybody who wants compensation in the same way. And I think that can only be flushed out through a process of someone who is experienced in dispute resolution. But what I was trying to avoid is that you then go and get the families together with the MEC and you have a band fight rather than have a mediated process. And I'm not sure what would come out of that, but I thought if you look at the trauma of the history of our country, you will be able to see that we should be able to overcome and discuss such people, not such issues, not that everybody will agree, but at least let's try and have an understanding of what happened. And I thought that the minister, the national minister, together with the premier, meeting with the families or their representative and the various other structures that have been involved, can actually come up with that way forward of compensation and mechanisms of redress that I couldn't specify in these recommendations. Thank you.
Yes, I think the first question to me was from Omar G, again from Power FM. I think you completely misunderstood what I said. There's no act. There was no act passed in 2002 which ever said patients must be transferred to communities. Such an act does not exist. All I was saying is the Mental Health Act 2002 took responsibility and power of dealing with mental patients from the national department so that it started vesting in the provinces. And so even at that time, it means then the contract that the government, the National Department of Health had with Life is Dimeni was then transferred to a province. It was not telling the province to send anybody to communities. So that's wrong. There's no such an act. The issue of communities maybe, which comes into the picture. We are working under the auspices of the Mental Health Global Action Plan of the World Health Organization, 2013-2020, and also the National Mental Health Policy Framework and Strategic Plan of South Africa, 2013-2020. Actually, I've got the documents here. This is ours, and this is of the World Organization. This document of the World Organization is based on a resolution of the 55th World Health Assembly, which was also held in 18 May 2002, about this issue of community care. Now, if you read them, both documents, they clearly outline what they mean by that and how it's going to be done. In other words, they are talking about the whole mental health having to integrate psychiatric hospital, community centers, integration into families, primary health care. The document even has drawn a pyramid of what must happen at that level. Now, they outline step by step what should happen when you do that. And that's what people call deinstitutionalization. The motive of the World Organization was that quite a number of mental health care users are capable of staying in community, leaving them in an institution. Some of them stay for the rest of their life. It was difficult to identify even some of them because some lose contact with their families for 20 years, not knowing where they are, or they don't even know their families. So the World Organization was saying it might be better to start issues of integration into communities. The World Organization did not do this for mental health only. They did it even for MDR-TB. For instance, we have got 9 special hospitals for MDR-TB in the country, multi-drug resistant TB, where people had to be locked in for 18 months. 18 months sitting in one center with your own room and your own toilet so that you don't infect others. The World Organization did the research and said, if you take their sputum and test it, and 3 consecutive sputa are negative, you can discharge that patient in the community. But you don't just sit in the office and discharge. You send out people. In fact, in terms of this document, it says we must form district committees. And as I'm speaking, 7 district committees in South Africa have been formed. An ideal district committee must consist of a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a social worker, an occupational therapist, and a psychiatric nurse. If any person must be referred to the community, it is those 5 people who must sit and work together to see how it's going to happen. Now, because our situation is not ideal, we have got 7 districts at the moment since we started, because we are forming them district by district. But not all of them, as you know, the shortage in South Africa will have the 5 people. But an ideal one will have that: a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a social worker, an occupational therapist, and a psychiatric nurse. That's how it needs to be done. So nobody must use the issue of deinstitutionalization, whether from our strategy or whether from the World Health Organization, for doing things that are outside what is described there, because it's written in black and white what needs to be done and how it needs to be done. I just thought it's very important to clarify that. I was also asked the last question, whether this was this a money-making scheme? It's difficult to see what money was going to be gained from here. Maybe because the professor also researched, it's just that he's trying to give you a summary. He researched this issue of saving cost or money. He did it, yes, he actually did it scientifically. Maybe I must hand it back to him to explain, because it's difficult for me to understand whether there's a money-making scheme or a corruption. But let me explain to you what he found out, because he did those calculations.
Thank you, Minister. Let me just clarify 1 or 2 things. The mental health policy and strategy is very clear about deinstitutionalization. This document that the Minister was reading, it actually defines the parameters. And one of the parameters is that before you deinstitutionalize, your primary health care system and the clinics must be prepared and be ready and be resourced and be functional. Now, if you look at this project, none of that was available. So you were deinstitutionalizing into an empty space that was not ready and prepared. And in fact, even all the NGOs said that. That's one thing. So the project acted contrary or in contravention of the policy that everybody follows. Secondly, the policy is clear. To deinstitutionalize people, you are trying to provide them into an unrestricted environment. Now, in this case, we took patients from a restricted environment and put them into more restricted environment in overcrowded NGOs. Now, overcrowding cannot be unrestricted. It's more restricted. Secondly, we took patients from a structured environment where they received care, food, and water into NGOs where there was no food, there was no water, there was no warmth. Now, could that be what the policy of deinstitutionalization wants? No. We took patients from their communities. There are many patients, some of them, they reside in Soweto. They've been taken now to Cullinan. Now, you're supposed to put people back into their communities. Where do you take them from? You take them far away from their communities. Now, that's contrary to policy. So we mustn't be fooled that this was a deinstitutional. This was actually contrary to the policy if you read it. I just wanted to clear that. The second one I want to make clear is this. I know of no protector in the country that has had to deal with life and death. I know all the protectors have dealt with people who have stolen money, who are corrupt, but nobody has had to deal with death of people. And even they don't deal with death, they deal with administrative issues. Here we're dealing with 94 people that have died. So in thinking of my own recommendation, I have had to think about these families that have lost 95 people that they will never see. And ask myself, which protector actually has ever made a recommendation about death? There's none in the country. So I've had to deal with that as part of my recommendation. And I want to make the last point. In health, decisions that we make are about trying to preserve life and to promote life. This project did the opposite. It did not promote and preserve life. It was taking life away from people. That's the difference that I think we must understand and never shy away from. The whole purpose of healthcare is to promote and preserve life, not to take life away.
Thank you very much. I'll take only.
They wanted to ask about this money-making scheme. Now, let me deal with it this way. I'm sure you have seen the MEC saying that she's been paying 10,000 rands on television on patients at Life Esidimeni. That basically translates to about 320 rands per day per patient. That's what she was paying. And of course, now she wanted to pay 100 rands when she takes them to the NGOs. Now, let me ask you, South Africans, what can you do with 100 rands per day? And what service can you provide? That's just one question that you must all exercise. The second thing is, since the project and now that patients are dying, several of these NGOs have been closed by the very same people who had told us that they had seen them and inspected them. They are now closing them because they realize that they don't have infrastructure, they don't have the know-how, they don't have the skills. They have taken patients from there and put them into places like Vescopis, Tutara, and other places. Now, you were paying 320 rands a day at Life Esidimeni. You are now paying 1,960 per day at Vescopis. What money have you saved in that process? And finally, I need to address the issue of the patients. I've said that patients are still at risk in the NGOs. One of my recommendations is that they must all be moved. I'm not saying that they must be moved back to Life Esidimeni because a legal process has taken place there on the closure. I'm saying they must be moved to suitable places within the province that we know exist and will provide them with the care that they need. I think that's one of the recommendations I have made. But to argue, you can't argue on the basis of cost, that this was a cost-cutting exercise. It has become an expensive exercise in the long term. And finally, we have a constitution in the country. And you would remember when people wanted to have antiretroviral, the constitution made a ruling that the state's obligation to provide care was more important than actually the money that should be available. So you can never just justify a cost cutting constitutionally when you have the state has got the obligation to provide basic care to patients. So I've seen that argument be made by the MEC. I don't agree with it because I think there's a constitutional precedence about it, particularly in relation to vulnerable people. At the time it was HIV/AIDS. We now have it here. And for some of you who often read the literature, you would remember an old man called Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi says, one of the ways you judge the quality of a society is how it looks after it's vulnerable. These people that were at Life Esidimeni were the most vulnerable. And if we had to really subject ourselves to that test as to how we dealt with them from Life Esidimeni into the NGOs, we would fail that test of Mahatma Gandhi. Thanks. But the exercise, was it a money-making? I think one of the witnesses did mention this, that some of the NGOs were attracted by the fact that they would be getting money. But I really was not given a mandate to see whether it was a money-making business or not. There are many things, I could have also investigated who was in love with who and so forth. That was not my business here. I needed to find out the circumstance or who won which tender. All of these things were coming through. But remember, the minister had asked me, look at the circumstances that surrounded the death of these people. So that's how I focused myself rather than be diverse. Otherwise, I wouldn't be finished and I wouldn't be talking to you here today.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'll take only 2 questions from members of the media. Only members of the media. 1, 2. Then we close the question session. And then we'll hand over to Prof, the chairperson of OHC, to hand over the report to the Premier of Gauteng. I'll take those 2 questions.
My question.
Only 2 questions from those 2. Yeah.
Sikelelwa Mdingi from ENCA. 2 questions, Professor. The first one is that the MEC made some submissions on your interim report about 2 weeks ago. Can you just share with us what it is that was in the submissions? And secondly, what did you find to be the main cause of death among the deceased? Thank you.
Second question.
My name is Ntike. I represent Spotlight Magazine. I just wanted to check whether the MEC was invited to this gathering and whether or not she declined, and also the director.
Thank you.
It's very easy. I don't deal with the invitations, but I know that both were invited, so I don't know what was their response. The first question dealt with, what was the first question? The MEC? What was the question on the MEC from? Oh, okay. Let me deal with the cause of death. We have had 94 deaths of mentally ill patients. It's remarkable that only 1 person has died from a mental health related illness. None of the 93 have died from a mental illness. They have died from other things other than mental illness, like dehydration, diarrhea, epilepsy, heart attacks, all other things except mental illness is what, there is a multitude of that is actually contained in the report. And it also makes it look very funny. When you read the report, it says somebody died from natural causes or it died from a natural cause. It puts your mind at ease. When you go and investigate, you find that actually somebody went to sleep the previous night in a place that is supposed to care for them, and they're found to be dead the following day. Now, you can't say that's natural because you don't know what happened in the middle of the night when you are supposed to look after them. Or somebody really had a fit and aspirated and died from there. You don't know whether they were on the right treatment or whether they were taking treatment or not. So all these so-called natural deaths are the ones that are going to be subjected to the inquest and toxicology and so forth. So I think the causes of death are other than mental health, and I would say they are other than natural from the little investigations that we have done. In terms of the response of the MEC, I just want to say, first of all, I think they wanted to change the data, and that's why initially I had to explain how people work within the health system. Actually, they assume that because everybody would be rushed to a hospital to go and die there, that's where you are registered and you belong in the health system. That's not how it works. So they wanted us to change everybody to have died in the hospital and so forth. And that's not how the health system works. I mean, when I was in London, I would see patients from Edinburgh. They never belonged to the hospital in London, they belonged to Edinburgh. But I had to see them in London for a particular reason, because that's where they are registered, and they are bringing them for me to do something else. And that's why I spend my time to say, when the patients left Life as Itimeni, they went to into three broad categories. They either went home, or they were registered into hospitals, or they were registered into an NGO. That an NGO comes and asks Dr. Makhoba as a physician to come and see a patient in their NGO, it doesn't make that patient mine. The patient remains the patient of the NGO. I think that's a very fundamental thing, and any standard practicing physician would know that the patient's point of entry is where they belong as they traverse the system of healthcare. Is there anything that I missed in this question? Okay.
Thank you very much. I'll now hand over to the chairperson of OHSC, Professor Lizo Mazwai, just to hand over the report, the final report to the Premier of Gauteng. And then before he can do that, let me announce that this particular report is available on our website, which is www.ohsc.org.za. And then you navigate, you'll see the publication on the main menu, and then under publication there'll be OHC documents, and then you'll see the report there, together with the annexures. Thank you very much. Over to Prof.
Thank you. Thank you, Program Director. It is my pleasure and privilege to hand over the report to the National Minister and the Premier. But let me preface that with one or two comments. First of all, to reiterate that the Ombud is appointed and reports directly to the Minister. And in this instance, the Ombud was instructed by the Minister, National Minister of Health, to investigate the report we see here. The Office of Health Standards and the logistics and resources are supplied or provided to the Office of the Ombuds. In other words, the resources and logistics are located within the Office of the OHSC. I chair the board of the Office of Health Standards, and therefore it is my honor as chairperson to hand over the report officially and publicly to the National Minister of Health, Honorable Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, and also the Honorable Premier of Gauteng Province, Honorable Mr. David Makura. In this country, we have many reports and many statements made about leakages. I'm not aware of any other report except this one, which I'm officially handing over. Thank you.
So we're not giving a closed envelope. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you very much. I would like to make an announcement that the media must just remain behind. After 15 minutes, we'll have a briefing by the Premier of Gauteng. We are requesting you that you must remain behind, especially members of the media, for another media briefing after 15 minutes. Thank you very much.
Sorry, before the Honorable Premier comes to address the media, he would like to see all the family members. As soon as he's finished with the family members, he will come back and address. The OHSC staff, they will lead the family members to the executive boardroom where he will meet them.
when it was going forever. That's why I gave you the note.
Yeah.
Right now, welcome back. That was the Health Ombudsman Malkhapur Makhoba, the professor, revealing that it's actually 94 patients who have died in this saga following the investigation into the deaths of psychiatric patients all over Gauteng. This probe was commissioned by the Health Minister Aaron Motsoaledi, who you saw speaking there as well, and it was commissioned in September last year. So we've got word that the number of deaths is likely to rise as the police carry on making their investigations. Right, now let's have a little bit of sport to try and lighten the mood a little bit. It's been a very heavy morning. A lot of people getting closure, finally understanding what has been going on there. But this is ongoing and we'll keep you abreast of any new developments. Now, to tackle some of the bigger movements in this latest transfer window in football worldwide, especially focusing on the PSL and our domestic league, is SABC sports reporter Mdudu Ndlovu, who's given us this time to join us this morning to chat about some of those big movements. Thank you so much for coming through.
Morning, Kendall.
Mdu, one of the big things that a lot of people have been talking about is Mandla Masango. Came up last minute almost, and he's the big story.
Yeah, we can say that it came up last minute, but it's been on the lips of SuperSports United and on their plans for the duration of the season up to so far. And then on Monday, the chairperson of SuperSports United, Mr. Kulusbia, was on one of our radio stations, Ukozi FM, to be specific, where he said that Mandla Masango surely will be joining SuperSports United, and giving space for Mandla Masango in SuperSports United is Dove Wome. The Tokyo striker has moved to Orlando Pirates on a loan for 6 months, and Pirates will have a chance to give him a full contract maybe after the end of this season.
Let's focus a little bit on Mandla Masango. Mandla Masango goes away, leaves Chiefs, he goes overseas, he comes back. It's almost like a revolving door. And it makes me think a little bit about Tifuma Shamaite. He left, came back, got snapped up straight away by SuperSport coach, Stuart Baxter. What is Stuart Baxter? Because he's the same one who's taken Mandla Masango. What is he planning? What has he got in the back of his mind?
Baxter worked with Mashamaite as Kaizer Chiefs. He was his captain. Baxter worked with Mandla Masango as Kaizer Chiefs. They won the championship with he won the championship with both players while he was coaching Kaizer Chiefs a couple of seasons ago. He knows these players. He knows the qualities of these players. He knows what these players are going to bring on the table in SuperSports United. We won't be saying that he's building a team with this. They are no longer youngsters.
Yes.
We know they are veteran players. We know them. They've been around for a couple of seasons. We know what they can bring to the national team, not only to SuperSports United. Having Mandla Masango back home after his problems with his team renders in Belgium, and him coming back home, I think this will also help Bafana because he will be here and he will be available. Whoever will take over as Bafana coach, he will have access to see Masango playing his trade right here locally in our local football side.
I mean, talking about that, there are some people saying Stuart Baxter is kind of in the running. He's put his hat in, or somebody's put his hat into the ring for it. But that's for another day. Let's talk a little bit more about what's happening with Kaizer Chiefs and Mamelodi Sundowns. They've been fairly low-key in this transfer window. Can you tell us what you think their plans are going forward towards the end of the season?
Sundowns, they've got a big squad, but a manageable squad. I have to add to that. It's a big but manageable squad of capable and good players that needs to be managed after winning that CAF Champions League. Those players need to be managed so that they won't be big-headed. Because some players, after winning such, I mean, that's why it's a
CAF
good
Champions
fit.
League,
CAF
they end up
Champions
at the
League, and
FIFA
then
Club
go
World
to
Cup.
FIFA World Cup in Japan. Some will be maybe complacent after that and all. They need motivation. I hope Peter Msima and the technical team at Sundowns, they have the know-how of how to motivate them, to bring them back to doing things the right way. And Kaizer Chiefs, we understand that they signed a striker, an Italian who is a Venezuelan born striker.
Yeah, the guy Paez.
Yeah, that's Paez, yes. We hopefully, he brought his scoring boots with him.
Yeah, no, definitely Kaizer Chiefs fans are hoping and praying for that. Somebody will score in boots. Mduduzi, thank you so much. Too little time, lots to talk about. I think I'm going to book you for next week where we can talk about coaches as well as players and see who's planning what, even on the other teams that you haven't spoken to.
Nice to be here. Kendall, I'll be here with you again.
No, very good. Mduduzi Ndlovu, SABC reporter, chatting transfers as the window closed last night. Everybody's got what they've got, and this is what they're going to use to try and win the league, at least to compete for top 8 if they're not already. That's where we leave it for now. We'll be back tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock sharp, till midday, to bring you the latest in sports, economics, and international news, as well as everything across the continent of Africa. You're watching Newsroom. My name is Kendall Makamate. Until tomorrow, the silence in.